Mr. Chair, you are now live.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and call to order the December 17th meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Annapolis. Tammy, please call the roll.
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Wallman,
Present.
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Here.
Mr. Imes.
Here.
Okay, seems that we have a quorum, which is always preferential. Start my video. Okay, we will have a very detailed agenda to go through tonight, everyone. And first and foremost on that, we've got a roll when everybody's present. After that, we're gonna, I'll go ahead and display our agenda here. We're sharing the screen. Approval of minutes for December 17th. Hopefully all the planning commissioners have had a chance to look at that. I will go ahead and display those minutes. Stop the share on the agenda. Hopefully everybody can see the virtual public meeting that was held on December 3rd for the Planning Commission. And I'll scroll through it for everybody really quickly.
And did we approve the agenda? I'm sorry.
The agenda as written, okay. Bring that back up. Thank you, Tammy, for keeping me honest on that. All right, everyone, if the agenda as written as you see, are there any needed changes? And for the new business, there will be some items in there that I have on a sub agenda on another page and how we'll flow through the meeting. We do have something to handle administratively for an Ex-Parte Communication, as well as some other things. Any need to change?
Wasn't E2 removed?
E2 was removed, correct. And actually that was, it says it down the bottom. It says public hearing is continued to January 7th. So we're not gonna hear it tonight. So we do need to actually remove that. And the latest edition, I believe, has that in it. Am I correct, Tammy?
Yeah, the one that was sent out earlier today.
Yes.
But I mean, that public hearing was never open, so it's, I don't mean to be
Correct.
pedantic here, but it's not really continued. It was never really open.
It's a good point. So this one highlighted will not be happening today. And the one up here is the one that is still in continuance.
I think what we had said was that the public on the revised agenda was that the public hearing was postponed at the request of the applicant.
Technically, not yet. We're gonna get to that here in the meeting today and postpone.
Yeah. The second one, I mean, we had postponed at the request of the applicant.
Correct. The second one was.
Yeah, that's all I meant. Yes.
But never was it open for public.
Right.
hearing.
It's just postponed.
Right.
Which
That
one?
item will actually be re-advertised when it
Right.
finally comes forward.
Okay.
But we had already published this agenda, so when we revised the agenda, we didn't just take it off and make it disappear. We just said that it had, you know, the way we do that is say that it's been postponed. But the agenda had already, the original agenda had already been posted on the city website.
Okay. So commissioners, we are amending the posted agenda due to the applicants wanting to postpone item number 2. Is that definitely till the next meeting, or is that indefinitely until we find a better date?
It's indefinitely. It will be re-advertised for
Okay.
whatever date we follow on.
So that has been postponed.
Yes.
All right, with that amendment to the agenda, do we have any I'll motion that we approve the agenda with that amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the agenda passes. Let's get on with our business. And moving on to, back to the minutes.
Ben, I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay,
I'll second that.
there's a motion. It's been seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes pass. We'll stop sharing that and go back to our agenda. All right, for the new business, we have the review of the annual report for 2020. Jackie,
Yes.
is there anything we'd like to handle with that now, or do we like to wait a few minutes on that item?
Well, we can wait, and we can actually take that up at the end of the meeting if you would prefer. That would be fine.
Okay, let's go ahead and wait till the end of our meeting to handle that. We'll handle that after another thing from Bob. So I'll go ahead and stop the share here. And before we move, was there a comment from one of the commissioners? Okay. Now what we have here is a bit of a sub process for things we need to check off today to do in order. And we figured a good order was as such to advise the audience in order which you addressed via the slide here. We have an ex-parte communication complaint by the applicant that we will talk about here shortly. There's also an issue, item number 2 here, a public complaint of supposed applicant's failure to post notification for the application reviewed by the commission. That's posting on the property. We'll talk about that item as well. And I'm just going through some of the things that we talked about last meeting that the public wanted a little bit more information on. Also a process of the approval comments from planning and zoning. There were some issues noted on the application as it went through planning and zoning and how it got approved and who saw it and who might not have. We'll have comments from planning and zoning on that. There's articles for applicability and code from legal, and that's in reference to the Annapolis Environmental Commission testimony from last meeting. Then we will go into asking the applicant if there's any changes to design or anything that they would want to describe for their design or change in process at the moment they would like to take upon themselves. And then if we go into the applicant's design, then we would go into the rest of that stuff down there. And at the bottom here, Mr. Waldman wanted to talk about some things about the project and how we approve things to the Planning Commission. And then after that, we'll go into the review that Jackie was just talking about. All right, so to start that off, from the applicant, there was emailed to the Planning Commission and shared with the Planning Commissioners already and staff an ex-parte communication complaint. And this was with respect to Ms. Diane Butler. And I'm going to ask the applicant right now, what we can do is, would you like to make your case on that complaint right now? And if you do, then we'll let you make your case of the complaint and then follow it up by Ms. Butler's response to it. And then we would follow that up with the Planning Commission as a whole, including Ms. Butler, deciding whether there was the actual ex-parte communication issue. And then if there was, if anything needs to be done about it. We've talked with our legal department and it seems to be a wise process to follow, as the detailed process and the Planning Commission process documents is just not there. So this is kind of a first run through of the complete process for handling a complaint of ex-parte communications on an application under review. If there's any other things we're tripping over ourselves during this review from legal, Chris Beard, please, or Joelle, please feel free to step in for the city and the planning commission to help us get this right. Also, Mr. Waldman, as we talked about earlier. But first, over to the applicants and what I just described. Does that sound fair and a way to handle that complaint to you? And would you like to proceed forth with describing your complaint today? And if it is the case, I'll ask Ms. Butler if she's okay with it, and she would want to continue with it today as well.
Mr. Chairman, Stephen Hyatt here. I had a discussion with Chris Beard earlier, and I was under the impression that you had received our written request and that you were going to make the determination under your authority as the chairman of the Planning Commission. Several points. I'm happy to present to you the facts in the letter, but I definitely don't think it's proper for for Commissioner Butler to participate in the decision as to whether or not her own actions are ex parte or not. I mean, she can certainly rebut the fact, but in terms of making a decision, I don't think that's appropriate. I think the rules are clear, but initially I think my first question is, or point of interest is that I was under the impression that you were the one who was going to make the decision based on the information that was presented to you.
Okay, I received that request from your office, the letter, and I read that in the request. Also, I talked to Mr. Beard a short while ago. So everything's been happening so fast, probably didn't have time to get back to you. But I talked to him a short while ago, and he made your request known to me. And I felt that even though from the way I read the process that I could make that decision, I felt it best that as a planning commission as a whole, as a unit, we should all get together and hear the case, both sides, and then make our own decision as a whole. I felt it was better for the commission to show a unified front. As far as your presentation, I can bring up the letter and show that, and you could talk to it here. But before we do that, Ms. Butler, are you okay with the process that we described, and whether or not you're allowed to vote in the final part of determining whether we think you had Ex-Parte Communications or not could be determined very shortly by our legal opinion. But are you okay with that process, Ms. Butler?
Oh, yeah, Ben. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that process is fine. I didn't realize that I was going to be asked not to vote on that issue. I wasn't clear on whether there was, like, as you mentioned, a procedure that governed that procedure or this procedure. So it's up to you. I'm very happy to do whatever you think is best.
Okay. And from our legal department, Mr. Beard, would you recommend that she votes on that final ex parte determination or not?
I don't see any authority that she would not vote. I direct you to Chapter 6 of the Rules of Procedure, and it's very clear as to how it should proceed, and there's no indication in there that she should not vote. I can say that. So I don't see any authority to exclude her from voting.
Okay. Well, then we will
Well,
include her.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Beard, just as a point of interest, this is a pretty unique situation where the ex parte communication wasn't initiated by an applicant or a member of the public, and the subject of the issue, the hearing, if you will, the determination is a
Well, let me
commissioner.
interrupt you. There's a section 6.7. It says no member shall vote on a matter in which he or she has a personal financial interest or other conflict of interest or ethical concern. That would indicate to me that she would not vote, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Well, thank you for that clarification. That seems to be in alignment with Mr. Hyatt was requesting just now. So I'd recommend that we proceed forth with Mr. Hyatt bringing out the applicable points of his complaint letter, and I can display that letter for you, or would you rather, Mr. Hyatt? And then after that, we'll let Ms. Butler give her side, and then as a commission, we'll debate the issue.
You can display it or I can read it. It's up to you.
I'll display it while you're reading it. How about that?
Absolutely.
Let me stop share on this. Okay. You see that?
Yep. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and go through it. This letter was sent to Sally Nash at her request, Dr. Nash at her request, based on some communications we had earlier this week. On December 10th, 2020, I learned that Planning Commissioner Diane Butler initiated ex parte communications with members of the public regarding MRE's pending major site design plan at 101, 103 Annapolis Street in violation of the rules of procedure of the Planning Commission of the City of Annapolis. Specifically, PC Rule 6.3 states members of the Planning Commission shall not have communications with applicants and other persons during the pendency of any matter before the Planning Commission, which could influence their decision on that matter. Close quote. Communication took place in the form of an email on November 25th, 2020, and it was sent to several members of the public, allegedly residents of West Annapolis, and Alderman Rob Savage via his personal email was also copied. A copy of that email, as I received it, is enclosed with this letter, which you will see in a moment. Ms. Butler's email is extraordinarily unprofessional, unethical, and flat out inappropriate. Had the tables been turned and an applicant discussed the merits of an application pending before the Planning Commission with a sitting planning commissioner, there would be no question of the illegality of such action. Her actions clearly crossed an ethical and professional lines. The only reason I came to learn about Ms. Butler's inappropriate email was due to the fact that one of the email recipients, Trudy McFall, was concerned enough about the questionable nature of the email and alerted the head of the West Annapolis Civic Association. You will note in the attached copy of the email that in Trudy McFall's forward to Rebecca Brenia, head of WACA, there are potentially other emails that we have not seen. And the quote from the email below says, email number 1 that brought this to my attention, close quote. It's important to also note that Ms. Butler is an attorney and member of the Maryland Bar, and as such, she is held to a higher ethical and professional standard and is well aware of the inappropriate and unethical nature of her email, which is evidenced by her very own words to the recipients. She went so far as to say, quote, I am unable to chat about them with you because I am on the Planning Commission and will review the projects for approval or denial, close quote. She only made that statement after she discussed the merits of the project and asked the recipients to take action regarding the same. Quote, there are a few projects coming up in West Annapolis that you may want to spread the word about and comment on since they involve losing mature trees and possibly changing the look of West Annapolis, close quote. Furthermore, Ms. Butler, in her ex parte communication and in her capacity as a member of the Planning Commission, expressed her opinion and took a clear position against the project. Quote, I think there is a way to build good projects without decreasing our existing tree canopy, close quote. This statement clearly evidences Ms. Butler's inability to act impartially and fairly in her review of the merits of the pending application. Now, while Ms. Butler did not specifically reference MRE's projects by name or project number, based on the language of her email, combined with the fact that there are only several projects pending in West Annapolis, all belonging to MRE, and even fewer of those projects in which mature trees are involved, any reasonable person would know that Ms. Butler was referring to MRE's project at 101, 103 Annapolis Street. Moreover, Ms. Butler specifically emailed individuals who would be aware of and oppose the project, and in fact, one of the recipients, Trudy McFall, had already provided public comment in opposition on this very application on November 19th, 2020, 6 days prior to Ms. Butler's email. The two other email recipients, Nina Fisher and Virginia Woolridge, submitted public comment in opposition to the removal of the two mature trees exactly as Ms. Butler suggested. Based on the foregoing and the attached email, it is abundantly clear that Ms. Butler's ex parte communication violates the PC rules, and she is unable to act impartially and without bias in her capacity as a planning commissioner as related to MRE's pending application SDP 2020-001. Accordingly, we respectfully request that, in accordance with PC rules, section 6.4C, Ms. Butler be recused from any further involvement or participation in any consideration, deliberations, or voting related to MRE's pending SDP 2020-001, and that she should be specifically prohibited from discussing any matters arising or related to SDP 2020-001 with any other member of the Planning Commission, notwithstanding such discussions being subject to the Open Meetings Act, city personnel and staff, and all other persons until such time that the Planning Commission has issued its final opinion and the appeals period has told. Furthermore, in accordance with PC Rules 6.4b, the public testimony submitted by the three individuals Ms. Butler emailed must be excluded from the record, and they should be prohibited from any future testimony regarding the pending project. And that concludes the letter. And then if you scroll down to the second and third page, maybe even the fourth, you will see at the bottom coming up, Diane Butler's email to the three recipients that constitutes the ex parte communication. Mr. Chairman, I think it's plainly clear based on the rules. If a individual had done this, there's no question there would be sanctions to the individual and the applicant. And I think the reverse is true in this case. The evidence is clear on its face, and I respectfully request that Ms. Butler be recused based on the foregoing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hyatt. That concludes your side. Here's the letters. Is there anything else you want me to display to the public as I go down here in the commission?
No, just go through the email.
Okay.
Really, it's from the bottom to the top, but it's.
Yeah,
it's
we'll do that real quick. Okay. I will stop that share and over to Ms. Butler. Is there anything you'd like me to share on the screen, or would you like to share anything yourself?
Well, thanks, Ben. I don't have anything to share on the screen, but I would like to respond to the allegation that I violated an ex parte communication rule by sending an email telling 3 friends in Ward 2 that if they want to know more about an upcoming project or projects that impact the environment, how they can do that. I'd like to refer to the key factors about ex parte communications that I learned from the lawyers who teach the Open Meetings Act and ex parte classes for the Maryland Department of Planning. So basically, the boards and commissions are supposed to base their decisions on what was said at public meetings and hearings, meaning on the record. And this way, all parties are fully apprised of the facts and no one gains an advantage through private conversations. All members of a planning commission have the right to hear everything that is said about the case. Everyone, including the applicant and those who support or are opposed in a particular case, also have the right to hear everything that is said about the case and have the opportunity to rebut what is said or endorse what is said. Private conversations outside the public meetings undermine the open exchange of fair play. Having said that, the law recognizes that it is simply impossible to avoid all contact on all questions coming before the decision-making body. Board and commission members are appointed precisely because of their involvement in the community and understanding of the issues. It would be an unrealistic standard to meet if every ex parte contact resulted in a disqualification of a board member or nullification of that action or of the action. So if such contact has taken place, there are 3 steps that should be taken by the board member or commission member to avoid giving rise to a legally actionable claim. Even though in this case, I don't think an ex parte contact has even taken place, as a precaution, I would like to follow these steps to ensure that I am not a target of any future harassment or intimidation by Mr. Hyatt or the MRE development team. So if you don't mind, I'll just run through them. Number 1, end the communication. It says to explain to the individual that you cannot talk about the matter currently before the board or commission outside the public meeting. Okay, I did that. I did this in my email. I stated that I am unable to chat about any projects with you because I am on the planning commission and we will be reviewing projects for approval or denial. The second part of this test is, at the hearing, disclose on the record the fact that the communication took place and share any substantive information that you may have received during the course of that contact. So in this case, I'd like to disclose an email that was referred to in that you just showed on the shared screen, dated November 25th. There's no substantive information in that email. Number 3, the board member should indicate on the record whether or not the communication has left him or her unable to base a decision solely on the evidence to be presented at the hearing, so is no longer unbiased. I'd like to state for the record that I remain able to make a decision solely on the evidence being presented tonight and at the prior hearings on November 19th and December 3rd. It goes on to talk about the prejudicial effect of ex parte contact as being the fact that the other side is not given an opportunity to respond or is unaware of the contact altogether. Ex parte contacts, unless they lead to an incurable bias in the decision maker, are not detrimental to the proceedings if they are disclosed and the other side is given an opportunity to respond. I am not sure how directing friends in Ward 2 to get engaged in a transparent review process in any way creates prejudice or is detrimental to these proceedings. Given that my email does not meet the definition of an ex parte communication and it doesn't bias me in making a determination unless my planning commissioners disagree, I plan to remain part of the planning commission team on this issue, and I'll do my best to serve the citizens that rely on this commission for sound decisions based on the facts presented to us. And I think really that's it. I mean, I guess as an aside, I wanted to, kind of a postscript. I think most of you know that I serve on a lot of different volunteer boards and commissions. I serve on the Housing Authority's Ross Grant to help struggling families go from public housing to self-sufficiency. Last night I graduated with class 12 of the Anne Arundel County Master Watershed Stewards. I'm excited to work with this commission and our great planning department in developing a new comprehensive plan for the city. I serve on multiple transition teams, task force, and other commissions to help make Annapolis a better place to live. Do I make money from participating in these community civic organizations? No. Do I make a difference? I don't know. My friends say I do. But what I do know is that if I don't try to preserve our natural assets, like our trees, our creeks, and the bay, while promoting smart growth, or speak out for struggling families and all other causes that are dear to me, I couldn't sleep at night. I'm a lawyer, and I know what lawyers can do to intimidate and harass people who fight for the little guy. I have seen it work, and it's really unfortunate. So if this complaint by Mr. Hyatt and the MRA developers is filed to intimidate or to harass me, all I can say is that it's not working. It only makes me more committed than ever to transparency in government and protecting the people and things that can't protect themselves. So that's just an aside. Thanks for letting me give my point of view. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, commissioners, we've heard the complaint. We've heard the rebuttal by Ms. Diane Butler. Now it is over to us, in my opinion, to determine in our minds for the commission if there was ex-parte communications and what we should do about it. So
Mr. Chairman,
first,
as a point of interest, I would like to hear from Chris Beard on the legality and the merits of the complaint.
well, it's ironic you're saying that because I was just about to ask him what he
Okay,
thinks
great.
about what was just said. So
Perfect. Sorry for getting ahead of you there.
So it's over to us as a commission to decide, in my mind, what if there's ex-parte communications here and what we want to do about it to uphold as a commission our own rule structure, our own processes, and how the public thinks about us. And if we're cutting the mustard with respect to the intent of the law and ex-parte communications. So based on what we just heard, Mr. Beard, do you feel that everything is proceeding forth legally and that we're proper in what we're doing?
Absolutely. You're giving the burden to the complaining party. They've had an opportunity to be heard and present their written complaint. You've heard a response, and you should first determine whether an ex parte communication occurred and to what extent. And then even if it occurred or if it occurred, then you would then determine what the appropriate steps would be. And that second step, I think, really is making a determination whether the member is capable of making a decision based solely on the evidence. And I think those are the two primary issues you now have to decide.
Okay, thank you for that. And based on the complaint and given the exact part of our rules that was deemed to be broken by Mr. Hyde, I will go ahead and display that and talk with my fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of interest,
Go ahead.
yep, to clarify, we didn't do this to intimidate any commissioners. This was done to hold representatives of the city accountable for their actions. And
Wait a minute. Regardless of that, that's all outside of what we're considering here. We're just considering whether the complaint and the actual filed formal complaint is legitimate, and we're going to assess that. If we start going outside of that to the other stuff that was mentioned, that would get out of hand. Mr. Beard, do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, and also you're hitting specifically on the head what you need to decide, which is at 6.3 and 6.4. Okay.
Okay. So I believe in Mr. Hyatt's complaint, and there was I see Mr. Alderman Payon has his hands raised, and it's kind of out of my procedure to go right to Mr. Payon for this, because he would be considered a member of the public at this point. I'm going to refer commissioners and Mr. Beard. Is there any reason we should let anybody outside of the complainant and the defendant basically talk at this point, or is that kind of out of order?
I think if I could speak, I think this is a commission matter. I completely agree that however you decide to do it procedurally, that the commission should decide on how we maintain and protect the integrity of the commission. And I don't think this is a matter for public discussion.
All right.
I agree. As much as I'd like to hear from Mr. Payon.
I know, because he's a lawyer and I'd love to hear what he had to say, but sorry, I can't do that at the moment. All right, so we have 6.3. If I could point out to everyone on the commission, 6.3, what it says right here, please read that again. You can actually start up with 6.2 and read through 6.4 as well. And just to scroll down to see what is down there on 6.5. And the odd thing about this case is with the way the rules are written, it's generally seen as if the member of the public would communicate with and give information to the commissioner, not the other way around, which is kind of right in this case, where the commissioner is approaching the public on an item that's pending decision. So it's slightly different there, which is also referenced in the complaint letter. So to get things rolling here, I'm going to need to make a motion here whether we as a commission think that their ex-parte communications occurred or not in violation of 6.3, and then therefore we can discuss it. And then after we discuss it, there can be a second to forward that motion on for a vote. So being that the case is towards Mrs. Butler, she will not be able to vote on that motion if it goes through. So I'll go ahead and start, in order to get us talking about it, I'll go ahead and make the motion I'll make a motion that we vote as a commission on whether ex-parte communications occurred in violation of 6.3 as depicted in our code here.
I second that.
Is there discussion on the matter?
I just find it a little interesting because it's the other way around, as you said, Ben. Anything that she said hasn't really affected my decision, or I'm not sure if it's affected any other planning commission's decision, the decision makers. So I'm not sure if it is in that regard.
Okay.
That's what I'm confused about. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
That's the tough part. And I've thought about this for a while. In 6.3, plainly obviously says shall not have communications with the applicants or other persons during the pendency of any matter before the commission, which could influence their decision on that matter. Now, did that communication in itself influence the decision, or what did the communication cause a chain of events that would influence the decision?
Well, the
Is
way
it-
I would think about that is what was the substance of the conversation? And so in this case, it was an email that
Mhm.
said, hey, this stuff is happening, go comment. And
But it also gives her opinion on the project before doing that. That to me is where that's a
yeah,
line
no,
you can't
I
cross.
agree. But I think that's an opinion that's anybody that's ever interacted with Diane, even in a very perfunctory manner, would know that it's not like some like details of the project that nobody knew about were discussed as in sort of like insider information. I think everybody knows where Diane's a view on environmental issues are. I mean, she's clearly stated that in essentially in going over what her other roles are around the city. So I don't think that's any big surprise to anybody. And the fact that she said, well, whatever, there are other projects that talk about mature trees. I think that's all basically a matter of public record.
I also think that, just getting people to become involved in the process, especially during a pandemic when everybody's kind of, not tuned in, kind of makes a little bit of a difference there as well. But I don't see that it was specific about this, but I do understand you look at the other side and how many other things are going on in West Annapolis too, that it could be construed, but I'm not sure if she crossed the line or not.
Yeah, I think with respect to the letter of the law, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but from a from an intent, I don't see any issue with this intent wise, because it's, again, the ex parte communications are really, the intent is to prevent sort of backroom dealing. And I don't see that this is more, I think of this as more informational. It's almost just transactional.
This is indeed an unusual situation, one that's not usually, it's not mentioned or addressed in our rules. Our rules, as other people have pointed out, all deal with outside people trying to influence us. And in this case, we have a public body, the Planning Commission, which is composed intentionally of public citizens to involve the public. So it's an unusual situation in which a commissioner reached out basically to inform the public. I think that it skirts the edge of the envelope in terms of potentially inferring that the commissioner had some views on the subject and kind of inferentially communicated those views. So in that respect, I think it reaches the edge of the envelope, but doesn't go over the edge of the envelope. I think that Mr. Hyatt, as any good attorney would do, has stated his position and perhaps overstated it. I think that the evidence is somewhat thin in this case. As somebody pointed out, there was no substantive information that was communicated, only the opportunity to get involved in a public issue. Was it ex parte? Yes and no. in that it was not within the public record, but it was also, as we are often put in the position of members of the public asking us what's going on, or us telling members of the public there's an application that may affect our, their communities, and that they maybe ought to get on it. And I think that that's the function that we are appointed to perform. So the question is, Mr. Iams points out, so what's the effect of this? One of the effects of this is that various people have submitted public testimony. The applicant has had the opportunity to review all of that public testimony, as have we. So I'm questioning whether there have been any deleterious consequences from this, other than sort of, getting the community activated, which in some ways is one of the elements of transparency. But the final question is whether this particular commissioner can remain open-minded, and I think that there's sort of two facets to that. One of them is the facet that every judge asks every potential juror, can you keep an open mind and make a decision based only upon the evidence in the record? And every potential juror has to look inside themselves and answer that question for themselves. And so Ms. Butler is the only person who can answer that question, and she has said that she can. The other facet of this is by that person's actions, do they indicate whether they can make that decision? From what we know of Ms. Butler's actions, especially in consideration of this application, she has been very forthright in asking members of the city government staff to weigh in on some very specific questions. And all of that has been above board and has been, in fact, quite useful. So those are my thoughts on it. And I would circle back around to Mr. Beardside, which is one of the things that he said, which is that the burden is on the complainant in this case. And so each of us needs to make a decision based upon that burden and the information before us.
Thank you, Mr. Waldman. This item is one of the things that really confused and got me when I came on the Planning Commission. We're on the Planning Commission, members of the public. You would think we'd want to meld and go into the public and try to advise them that, hey, these things are going on and you want to come comment on this, and this is what's happening and this is what's going on. Well, let's do these things. But Ex-Parte Communications, Open Meetings Act, the rules are there. You can't do that. And it's weird. Once you become a commissioner, you have to give up a lot of what you used to do as an advocate for the community, it seems, when things are under your review, and it's painful. But in my mind, in the email, she gives her opinion towards the project already, and the evidence of the project has not fully been heard. We still had witnesses to go, which we still haven't gotten to. Now, notifying the public, I get it. That's fine. I have no problem with that, and I encourage that. That was fantastic to get more people to come talk to us. But for me in 6.3, where it says at the bottom there, which could influence their decision on the matter, their decision to me refers back to the Planning Commission as a whole. So when someone from the commission targets a specific group of people, it seems, to come comment on an item that share the same side as that commissioner voiced in that email, to me, that seems to go over the line for Ex-Parte Communications. Was it done in a positive result for the commission as a whole? Sure. The more people that come and talk to us, the better off we are. I don't care from what side of the issue. I want everybody to come talk to us. But for me, that's the way I interpret what happened. Are there any other comments from the commissioners? Anyone like to say anything else, except for, I don't believe Ms. Butler can comment at this moment since we're debating the vote that she won't be participating in.
You know, I find that, you know, that's how you see it. And then it doesn't affect me that way, of course. It could affect different people different ways. But that's your perspective. And I also think, like, you know, I don't think we should throw away these testimony from these people that testified, but you have to take it into consideration, obviously, and whether it's true or not. And that's kind of how I feel about, I can make my decision. I'm glad that I know about it at least, but I'm not sure if it's going to influence my decision.
I'll call the question.
What'd you say?
I will call the question.
Okay.
What is the question?
Well, just to clarify, the question is the motion, the current motion on the table is whether we should decide. So we need to vote on whether we should decide.
Well,
Then we need
not
another
voting on-
motion
It
to
is
decide
Whether-
to render an
Clear.
opinion.
that Ex-Parte Communications occurred in reference to 6.3.
So a vote of yes means that we think that the commissioner should recuse herself. A vote no means that we think that the commissioner can continue on with this application.
I don't think we're at that point.
Actually, I wouldn't go that far. I would think there's defining ex-parte, and then if we should do anything about it, is it worthy of doing anything about it?
Right, I think those are
The
separate
question
things.
was, is there ex parte communications? or
Right,
not?
not to actually do anything for it yet. That would be later. Make sense, Mr. Beard?
It makes sense to break the question in two.
Okay. All right, well, Mr. Waldman called the question. Any other comments from the commissioners? Okay, the question is Ms. Diane Butler's actions seen as an ex-parte communication in reference to 6.3? If you feel that it is, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay.
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 Any abstentions? The nays have it. It is not ex-parte communications as determined by the commission as a whole. Okay, therefore, we will not go into any further deliberation about the matter. So, Ms. Butler, the commission has determined that this is not an ex-parte communication to the best of our ability. Mr. Beard, was that handled properly? And should I ask the applicant if he has anything to say to continue the complaint or anything like that?
No, I think you've made a decision and now you go to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much.
So I do need some clarification, because I'm not following it. I
I'm
apologize.
sure we all do.
Because so when I listened to your motion, it seemed like you said you moved to vote that the Planning Commission vote as to whether there was communication occurred, ex parte communication, and whether there was violation. And that was the motion, I thought. But then when the vote took place, it's kind of saying that there wasn't. So
Correct.
shouldn't there have been another separate vote where someone would say there was no ex parte communication and there was no violation? And
That's
then
what-
that one would pass?
I don't believe there should be. Mr. Beard, what's your opinion?
I think the question was answered that she stated at first. Was there an ex parte communication and was there a violation? The commission has answered no and specifically gave its reason on the first part of the question.
Does that clarify it, Ms. Hook?
I'm still confused, but I'm just going by your motion. You were the one who made the motion. But it wasn't clear that you were saying that. You just said you wanted to take a vote on it.
We
And,
want
and
to
that,
vote as a commission if we determined that it was ex-parte communications or not.
so shouldn't someone say that, there was not? Shouldn't Mr. Wallman or somebody say, I moved that there was no ex parte communication and
No.
no violation? No?
No.
Okay.
The motion was denied, Ms. Hook. The motion to determine whether it was could have been two parts. The first part, if the first part was approved, then we would go to the second part. But the first part was voted down, so there was no ex parte communication. That was the substance of the motion, and we do not need to go any further. So a
Understood.
vote of 3-1, it was determined that there was not an ex parte communication.
Fine. I will let you look at the minutes and then you guys can clean it up a little bit. I'm still
Great.
unclear. Okay.
Thank you.
Fair enough. All right, thank you, commissioners. We got through that, I guess, in relatively short order, short enough. And instead of talking about that, well, I don't know. Do you feel it went okay, commissioners? Mr.
Yes.
Klein, Mr. Waldman?
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the only thing that I would add from this point on is, this is a good learning experience for all of us.
Yes,
Where
yes.
we don't do this professionally, so that's the way I would look at this experience is, let's all mind our P's and Q's, as it were.
Okay. Ms. Butler?
Yes, thank you, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to address this issue. And I would point out that being active in the community is a curse and a blessing. Because I know so many people and I'm involved in a lot of different issues, people call me all the time and say, do you know this? Do you know that? And I'm often saying, no, go ask your alderman. I can't comment. In this particular case, because the sign on the property was there for such a short time, I got a barrage of voicemails saying, hey, why isn't there notice? You're continuing, the planning commission is looking at this. Why isn't there a sign? And, the law doesn't require there to be a sign past a certain date. So I understand the public's confusion and, my attempt to try to help people understand that was probably seen as something I shouldn't do. But again, as being someone active in the community that believes in transparency, believes that people should participate in this process, I believe that, the information about how to get involved was not detrimental in any way to anyone on this commission. So anyway, with that, thank you, and let's move on.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Iams? I believe you wanted to say something? No? Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed.
Fine, I'm fine.
All right. Anybody dying to hear what Mr. Payon had to say, or we can ask him after the fact? I think he left. Oh, there he is. Mr. Payon, dying to know
Yes,
what you wanted to say while I go ahead and switch screens. Go ahead.
Well, it's a little late. I was contacted by one of the three people that was alleged to have been contacted, and she wanted to address the commission.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Almost now don't want to have to ask what you have to say, but I don't know. It's already done. Okay, let me share this other screen. Mr. Beard, any issues with what Mr. Payon just said, Mr. Beard?
No, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, we'll move right along then. Back to, okay, some items we need to clean up before we get to the actual applicant himself for the application to be reviewed. There was a public complaint of supposed applicant's failure to post notification of application review by the commission. That complaint, I'm asking the Planning and Zoning Department to explain the notification requirement real quick for how long a sign has to be up before and during pending application reviews or under review as they are now. And for instance, that we go 2 and sometimes 4 weeks in between the start of a review and when maybe we conclude it. Could you also address that? So from planning and zoning, signage, posting, and also online posting timelines. Could you just review that for the public real quick?
Mr. Chair, Kevin Scott, Senior Planner for Planning and Zoning. I think I can address this. This application originally went to the November 17th Planning Commission hearing. The property was posted on November 4th, which is 15 days prior to the hearing as required by code. And that also ran in the newspaper on that date, and mailed notices were sent to property owners, community associations, aldermen, so on and so forth, to people that own property within 400 feet of the property, all required by code. The case was continued from November, was it the 17th or the 19th? I'm losing track of the dates, but the first meeting, you continued the hearing to December 3rd, and the rules of procedure at 8.16 say that if the chair continues the hearing and announces the date and time of the next hearing, no additional notices are required. So that's what happened. At December 3rd, you continued it to December 17th. Same deal, no additional notice requirements. I guess the theory is if anyone interested in the case came out the first time, and if they're watching the hearing, they will always see when the next hearing, I mean, you could continue this hearing 20 more times and people will always know when it is continued to, because they're part of the proceedings. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
And it will always be posted in our agendas that are posted online.
The
Some
agendas are
people-
always posted online.
Right.
We also, our project list is on our planning and zoning webpage, and our e-track is working. It was working when this project first started back in May. We did post the property with public notice sign during the agency review at the onset, and sent out the packages to the aldermen of the ward, the community associations, the West Annapolis Civic Association, West Annapolis Business Affiliation. We did hear back from all those groups.
I have a question. When these items get continued, who would notify civic organizations again? I'm assuming that it doesn't happen, that, hey, it's been continued again to another meeting. There's no additional notification. There's no reposting of a sign on a property. Some people have complained in our last meeting that, hey, we had the meeting tonight and I never saw anything posted on the property. Well, evidently they don't understand that it was posted weeks ago for the first time that this issue came up. And until they found out by being notified that, hey, come out to this meeting. Yeah, so has there been any talk about maybe adding on to that sign posting, or any other commissioners have an issue? I know Ms. Butler was worried about this from before. Anyone else? Okay, well, that's the explanation at that point for the public, and that complaint will file that as chalked off. Thank you, Mr. Scott. We'll move on to, go ahead.
Oh. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying it would be great to be able to leave the sign up during the time the public hearing is taking place for a project that impacts the community, because people just, might not have caught the very first planning commission meeting to know that it was continued. But if the law doesn't make the developer do that, I don't see how we can make the developer do that. They could do that if they wanted to really make sure the community was involved and engaged, but I don't think there's any way we can make them do that. And I think that if we wanted to change the law, we would suggest that one of our aldermen make that modification. And I propose that maybe somebody should, but I think for our purposes, the sign came down probably, as Kevin said, in the appropriate time. And, it's not as transparent as some of us would like, but it's what the law says.
I think it comes again, we're going back to the point of we're in this pandemic and we're doing these meetings that are extended and that people aren't engaged. In a real world, it would be nice if the developer kept it up. It would be, I think, in everybody's best interest. But if the law can't do it, then we can't do it. And I don't see we can change the law just because of this temporary situation.
And in this case specifically, I have to say there has been no dearth of information about this in the community. As a West Annapolis resident, I get the community emails, and I hear people talking about things, or whatever, just in terms of the neighborhood communication. And it's not like this is a surprise. So I think the presence of a sign, while somebody might see it walking that hasn't been aware of the other neighborhood communications, I don't think that was really make any difference.
I thought it was really interesting that Alderman Payon, who attended the last meeting, made a point of saying he thought a lot of the residents that had contacted him had no idea that this was a project that was coming up. He specifically was concerned that people didn't know, and that I guess the West Annapolis Civic Association had just recently sent out an email talking about it a week before, after our first planning commission meeting, because it had actually not been talked about, of the trees specifically. So, I mean, the point is the posting was legal, and there's nothing we can do other than say, if the developer wanted to leave up the sign, he could, he didn't. So residents have to be aware. And, I think there's a lot of Annapolis that are working really hard to get people engaged. So that's all good. And I do thank Alderman Payon for jumping in there at the last meeting.
Okay, so if you feel that they should maybe change the law, then you can actually make a recommendation and it can happen. To leave it up through until the item has done its review through the planning commission.
Ben, this is Ben,
Feel
this
free.
is Sally. I would just point out that this is part of your rules of procedure. So it's not in the code. It's something you yourselves have control over. If you want to update your rules of procedure, you are certainly welcome to do that.
Thanks for that slap in the face. So we will update our rules of procedure to do that. Okay. Well, we'll attack that in our next meeting or future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 3, I'll throw the ball right back in your court, Sally Nash. There was the process for approval of the application to then go to the Planning Commission through Planning and Zoning. There were some issues last time. It seems that during our growth and changing of departments, the way they're organized, who's where, that there might have been an item or two on the application that was missed proper review, but was then later corrected. Could you explain that and tell us as a commission why that might have occurred and if it's remedied?
Sure, let me clarify that. Kevin went through the procedure a little bit just now, but basically when we get a project in for site design, we post the property for 15 days and we notify the aldermen and the civic association and the business association groups of that project. All of that was properly done in this case. We also send it out to other agencies within the city or county for review. Sometimes who we send it to depends on what exactly it is. So for example, we wouldn't send a project like this to the health department, but we would send a restaurant to the health department, which is a county agency. So in the past, we were, when Office of Environmental Policy was a separate group from us, we tended to send large projects to them, plan developments. Tom often always sends projects to them. So it's kind of the bigger, larger developments. Now though that the Office of Environmental Policy has been dissolved, and as you know, Brian Adams has come into our department, which has been very helpful. We're so grateful to have him, just literally down the hall from the landscape architects. So the landscape architects and the arborists can get together and talk about trees. I think they've found that all to be very productive. And since Jackie is now with Racine as Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability, the code change that created this position also specified that all plans go to her. So now we are sending all site design, plan developments, anything we get for agency that goes out for agency review, we send to Jackie. And she is the liaison for both the Annapolis Conservancy Board and the Annapolis Environmental Commission. So she will be, interacting with those groups and getting feedback from them on those projects.
So in
And
essence,
then, as always, they send comments back to us. We make sure everything is good with the project, and then we bring it to you eventually.
Okay, so hopefully everybody followed along there. There's been some changes departmentally, and now they've been remedied. So any error that was that may have occurred has been remedied already with this application and should not happen with future applications. So that question. Thank you.
This project was first applied for before the changes that I've described, so, with an environmental policy.
Okay, any questions by the commissioners of Dr. Nash before we proceed on? Okay, we'll proceed on to the next item, the articles for applicability in the code, explanation from legal. I'll be looking for Mr. Chris Beard and or Joelle Braithwaite to explain. There was an issue the last time for the Annapolis Environmental Commission testimony about which articles in the code were applicable. And if we could expand upon that and just clarify for the public in this one to rehash it for us in short order.
Well, for this project, there's 3 sections that are being focused on. And really the one that is central is factors in major site designs, which is 21.22.080. There's also the one on factors for tree preservation, 17.09.030. And then there's the issue of planning, which is 21.62.040. the one on major factors in major site designs hasn't been discussed at length, but what it says under B, existing trees, tree stands, and natural vegetation shall be integrated into the site planting plan to the maximum extent possible. That's one section for you to pay attention to. And the other sections has been alluded to by council and also in testimony. Looking at 17.09.030, the guidelines for selecting trees for preservation. And in that, it lists a number of factors. And in determining which trees shall be preserved for the development process, consideration shall be given preserving those which, and what it does is it lists a number of factors that the commission should weigh in making the preservation decision as part of the development process. And there's 13 factors. What's interesting about this section is there's a second part to it that discusses what's called conflicting criteria. The applicant's counsel did allude to that. It says in the event that two or more conflicting guidelines are present in the evaluation of the preservation of trees on a site, consideration shall be given to those criteria most relevant to the planned use of the proposed development. So it'll be up to the commission to discuss the first code section I referenced, as well as the guideline factors. And then it'll be up to this commission to discuss whether there's conflicting criteria, and if so, to give consideration to those criteria most relevant to the planned use of the planned development. There's also an important section that has been referenced before, and that's the third part, which has to do with planning, which is have been already discussed. And I think that pretty much covers it, unless you have some questions.
I'll go through this later with a little more focus.
Very good.
And thank you very much, Mr. Beard. Any other commissioners have any items they really need to bring to Mr. Beard now, or we can go through later with Mr. Waldman? Okay, wonderful. Really, Mr. Beard, thank you for that. That was very good insight for the applicability of the code sections. All right, moving back to. All right, finally, we've taken care of all the administrative work except for going to the big potato now. The application that was continued till tonight. Now, there was some possibility coming through staff that the applicant may want to take a pause with the application. So I'll lead that over to the applicant now to state what they would like to do. I would have normally asked, have there been any changes in design since the last meeting before we start opening back up the public testimony and going through reviewing what people want to say about the project. But first, I have to ask you, have there been any changes to design, or would you like to change anything in process at this time, Mr. Hyatt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we've made fairly significant changes. We took the public comment and Planning Commission's feedback under consideration and worked with planning and zoning staff to come up with a revised plan that we think is a reasonable compromise. But at this point, and we had previously requested, in light of those changes, based on feedback we received from the city, that they would have to do further review on their end before the Planning Commission could finally vote. We were going to try and make this meeting into a work session, but at this point, we would request that we postpone any further action or deliberation on the application until we've had time to regroup, and we'll go back to the planning and zoning folks to get their updated staff report moving forward.
Okay, so you'd like to take a pause on it and rework some items and work with planning and zoning. That would mean that we would correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Waldman, I'm thinking about so much at the moment. We're going to handle this with a pause, and we're going to continue. We would continue the public hearing on this application until a future time at which the applicant is ready to bring their changes back through planning and zoning and to the planning commission for presentation, and then further public comment on those changes. Does that sound correct? Mr. Waldman first, and then Mr. Hyatt.
Well, what I might suggest, in order to make whatever, interregnum between tonight and the future to make it productive, is that perhaps we continue with testimony. There's information to be gotten from several experts, some of them in city staff and some of them civilian, which may help inform whatever happens in the future and would move us further down the road. So that, and it would be up to the applicant if at the end of tonight, if they would want to break out into an informal work session to present where they are, and to get feedback from us based upon what we've heard, or not. That's their decision. Work sessions are always up to the applicant. But I would suggest that we continue forward with testimonies and then see where we stand after that. I would also just point out for everybody in the public that the work session, whenever and wherever it is, would be open, would be a meeting such as this, where they could see what's going on. They couldn't give testimony because it's not a hearing, but they could certainly see what's going on. I don't know if the applicant wants to reveal what they've been thinking of, but I would like to hear the rest of the testimony.
And Mr. Hyatt, right before we get back to you, take into consideration, if we do public testimony and more expert comments tonight, would that still be germane since you're going to change the application, the project somewhat? You know what I mean? What's more
Sure.
efficient?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, the project is changing to the point where I think most of the public testimony, which we've seen already, the written submissions, we've seen them, and we were working as late as earlier today on an updated plan. So we've had time to review all of that. Those comments, that testimony is not germane, is not relevant to what would be the revised plan. And procedurally, and I would respectfully request that someone from planning and zoning staff step in based on the fact that this has to go back to planning and zoning and have further agency review. I don't believe it would be relevant or necessary to continue on with any type of deliberations whatsoever. I think, plain and simple, this is the end of this version, and we'll start over basically.
Okay,
at a
but
future
for
date.
efficiency's sake, for efficiency's sake and for your own efficiencies, is there anyone that we should call to testify tonight, experts that we haven't heard from, a Bartlett tree expert for the city stormwater, that could help you better make your changes and get them over with tonight?
Well, no, we'll make those. We'll have those folks discuss the revised plan once we make those final revisions where it will be applicable. Because right now they're going to be they'd be testifying to something that nobody's seen. So I don't think it's appropriate.
Well, what I would like to hear, though, is from Mr. Urban, who is a former commissioner and a really recognized expert in urban trees, pardon the puns. And I don't know that he would be expressing an opinion on any specific plan, but he would be giving us information on trees and their preservations or the difficulties in preserving.
But the whole thing is if we let people testify tonight, will they have on something that's not even a plan that's in place yet? Will they still be able to testify later as well? Or, I mean, is there a reason why you need Mr. Urban today and not next week? Or is he not available?
It's up to you. I always would like to hear from him because he's got so much information to convey.
I guess
That's up to the rest of you.
my sense on this is that if things are going to be substantially different, I don't think it makes sense to take up everybody's time to sit and
Okay,
listen to any testimony that may or may not be relevant. And I guess we don't really have, I mean, we'll have to take the applicant's word for it because only they know what changes they're going to make, or maybe they've discussed that with staff and staff could either refute that or agree with that. But I just don't want to have to go, spend, how many people are on this call? 25 people? I don't think we all want to sit and listen to testimony that's not necessarily going to be germane. I'd rather wait and see what the changes are, and we'll go from there. I
okay,
think that makes more sense.
okay, okay. It's your call. It's okay.
I mean, especially just with respect to Mr. Urban's comments, I read over the stuff that he provided in writing, and if a lot of that, if he was going to discuss a lot of that, I don't think maybe that it's germane. So that's why I'm saying.
That's fine. That's fine. I did not have the opportunity to read his comments because they didn't come across, but I'll get them through staff. That's fine. That's okay with me. Okay. That's okay. I mean, it sounds like there's significant movement, and we should respect everybody's efforts.
Yeah, I would like to thank the applicant for actually listening to the public and to Planning Commission and seriously taking another look at it. I really do appreciate that. I think it's the way the process should work. So thank you. I also want to thank city staff for answering a lot of the questions that I had. I know you're super busy, and taking the time to talk to me or email me these answers was really took time and effort. So thank you so much.
Okay, any other commissioners with comments?
And there is something in the chat that you should see.
Okay, I will look for that if
No.
and so we're gonna
No.
give me about, I would have to go look at that, and not everybody else. Is it for everyone, every commissioner to see?
Yes, I can read it. It's from Trudy McFall.
Well, hold on a second. It's from Trudy McFall, but
We
Try.
can all see the comment. Just click on the chat and you can see the comment.
okay. I'm trying to do a million things at once here. There's a lot you don't see that I'm doing. Trying to move things for, let me see that. Okay, commissioners, do you see any reason to address any more public comment at this time based on the webinar chat or anything else?
No, if you open it up for one, you have to open it up for all.
Agreed.
That's what I'm getting at. Okay. All right, Mr. Hyatt wants to take the project back with his team to the applicant and review the project based on previous inputs that were given by the community and the commission. That will then get also reviewed and worked over by planning and zoning staff. And I perceive that we would have a work session. I think it was mentioned by the staffers as well as Mr. Hyatt. And we could maybe break into that tonight for a half hour, an hour. I just want to clarify that, Mr. Hyatt, you do not want a work session of any amount of time tonight with the Planning Commission. Is that appropriate? Or Mr. Hyatt?
Well, if we would just have a work session, a few minutes to go over without public testimony and understanding that this isn't a finalized plan and we aren't having experts, I think we could, I don't know if all of our folks are here. and we still have a lot to consider, but I think in light of some public comment and the fact that we are here now, perhaps we could have a brief work session.
Okay.
I would be in favor of that. I'm always always interested in hearing, what preliminary plans are, and that way we have a chance to let things sink in, over time. And when we do finally see, the more formal stuff, however far ahead of the meeting it is, we have some context to look at it. And I just think it ultimately provides better the more times we can communicate back and forth, even if it's preliminary, it really helps us understand, where it's going. And I think it's ultimately gets a better product. So I'm
Okay.
always in favor of that.
And I think we would have time for that. There's 2 items we would have to finish up before we close the meeting and could go into work session. And one of those would be Mr. Waldman's comments with regard to process. And then the other will be Ms. Jackie Rouse and what we had talked about earlier presenting. I'm hoping those will take 15 minutes or less in total. And then we can move on to a work session after we take a 5-minute break for everyone to do that. Does that sound logical, commissioners?
Yep, that sounds fine to me, Ben. Good idea.
So Ben, just a point of process point. So I think we're not announcing a specific date to which the hearing tonight is being continued, which means that the project would have to be re-advertised when it came back. Is that correct?
It would be indefinite since we'd have a work session of which we don't know when yet, and the work through the. So yes, we would have to advertise it, and I would think we would have adequate time. Is that correct, Mr. Hyde? That you're the
I
applicant
would
representative.
defer to council or city planning staff, but if we need to re-advertise for the next public hearing, we're happy to do that.
Right. I think that the point is that unless we announce a specific date when the hearing is continued to, then we do have to re-advertise. I just wanted to make that clear to everyone.
So a couple of points on that. I mean, we have an open public hearing, so if it's gonna get to the point where it gets re-advertised, we have to close the public hearing. I mean, we can always postpone the public hearing till our next meeting, and then at our next meeting say we're going to postpone it again. I mean, I don't know why we would want to do one thing versus the other, but we sort of have to.
Well, we would then you would announce that it's continued to January 5th, January 7th.
Right. That's my point. We just
yes, you could do that, Alex.
How about
that's
this?
my point. We just need to decide on what path we're going.
But if we continue
Kevin or
it
Tom,
and have to re-advertise, don't we get the bonus of they would have to post the property again with advertisement for the item?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe they're going to spend some time with the city before they come back to you all. So we'll be most likely re-advertising this.
Okay, then we should
Which
probably
also
close
means-
the public hearing. And
Does that mean posting the property as well?
That's correct. Because we
Okay,
don't know
that's
when
a
the
good
next
thing.
hearing will be. We don't know when they'll be ready to come back for a hearing.
So all we,
Perhaps we should let the applicant make that decision.
all we need do then, to my understanding, is simply continue it indefinitely. And then once everybody's ready, it'll get reposted and re-agended. But we're not closing the public hearing, we're just continuing it indefinitely. Is that correct?
That's what I suggested a few minutes ago. Does that sound correct, Ms. Rouse, to you?
You just, if you don't continue it to a specific date, then it does have to be re-advertised. So you could do what Alex suggested, which is continue it till January 7th. And then at that meeting, you could decide to continue it to the next meeting. I mean, there are 2 pretty clear options,
Okay.
either that or,
And I'll take it a step
and I think
further.
you should ask the applicant which they prefer. That's just a suggestion.
I'd take it a step further that we go ahead and call a spade and continue it to the 2nd January meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I might also suggest that I had emailed you, I think, 37 items. The whole commission, you might want to formally bring those into the record. Just saying.
But we are not going to review those tonight. But
Don't review them, but I think you just need to acknowledge them, bring them into
Yeah.
the record.
a lot of admin for to take in. Okay, so I recommend, and Mr. Hyatt, I will recommend that we continue this to the second meeting in January. That gives us time, and that way we're not continuing again January 7th, because we probably know we would have to. You
So
think
that would be January 21st.
Yes. Any issue with that, Mr. Hyatt?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay, and I think it gives us the efficiencies of what Mr. Klein was suggesting, as well as not having to continue it again on January 7th, because, and we know we're not going to be ready by then.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we will continue this item, application item, until January 21st, which is our second Thursday meeting in January. And the public opinion window will remain open for the public to submit comments via online and also to apply to testify here in person. We are not going to go over any live testimony tonight for the application, and nor will we go over any submissions that were submitted. We will handle those at the next meeting where we broach this application again, which it is continued to January 21st. Any issue from staff on that? Just want to double check. Tom, you good?
I'm good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Nash? Hearing nothing. I think we're good.
Sounds good.
Okay, and now on to Tammy Hook for taking everything into order right now. We have to take into evidence all of these submissions.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask you. Thank you.
Okay, so we have to take.
We got all the public comments in, and I've put them as exhibits in the record. Are they going to stay in there, or do we move them out?
No, they're in.
They're in.
We keep them in the record, and we will go over those comments the next time we bring this application up to ensure that they are broached.
Okay, thank you.
And Ms. Hook, do we need to take into evidence the complaint filed by the applicant with regards to Ex-Parte Communications, the formal letter? I believe I sent that to you prior to the meeting and asked that we take that in.
That's in the Hyatt letters and then some stuff that was submitted by the applicant was, I put in the 4 items for that, plus all the public testimony.
Okay, perfect. Sounds wonderful. All right, so we have continued that item. All is done with that, and we will move on to our next issue, which is Mr. Waldman, to talk about some legal process here. Mr. Waldman, are you prepared, or would you like me to bring up some files for you?
Well, let me talk a little bit first, and I'll rely on you to do the screen sharing because I don't know about me. And I promise to be brief. It occurred to me based on in the last meeting that there's, I don't know about confusion, but it might be helpful if we just went over the relevant sections of the code, just to let it sink in, and so we have some ideas of what the process is and how to go about making a decision. Not what the decision should be, but how do you make a decision? And so there are 3 relevant code sections, as Mr. Beard said earlier. And if you could put up the first one, which is 1709-030, which is guidelines for selecting trees for preservation. Now, the order in which I'm presenting is I'm starting with some of the most specific, the 2 most specific, but the larger one and the really decisive one is the third one, which are the factors of the review criteria for major site designs. And I'll get to that last, but I think that we should be looking at the guidelines for selecting trees, the requirements for planting, and then absorb those into the much larger umbrellas of the review criteria and findings. In other words, the major site design factors, which are written in more general terms. So let's start off with guidelines for selecting trees for preservation. And I've highlighted, if you could put that up.
Okay, I'm trying to put it up here. It's just taking a second to.
Come on, I'm depending on our IT department here.
Hey man, I'm a one-legged man in a contest here. Well, we gotta have a little bit of levity here. Otherwise this wouldn't be any fun. All right, it's opening. And I will share that screen. Does that work for you?
Yeah, and I highlighted what I think are the most, what our minds should focus on. So these are things to be considered when we're dealing with the issues of tree preservation. Do they complement the design, and including the streetscape appearance? So the issues have been raised. We've heard people comment and have read people's comments, but one of the things to consider is so the streetscape appearance. Secondly, do the trees in question exhibit strong branching and rooting capabilities and are disease and insect resistant? And we've heard testimony, and there's apparently might be some lab results that we're going to hear, but we've heard testimony about what the rooting capabilities are of these trees. Are they tolerant of environmental change? In other words, if things change, not necessarily, I mean, the examples given are a sort of above the surface, but one of other examples might be below the surface. Are they tolerant of environmental change to their subsurface structures, rooting systems? Do they provide a good source of food cover and nesting sites? We've also gotten testimony to that effect as to how valuable they are for those purposes. Well, do they exist in natural groupings? You have to decide. What's all that? Get rid of that. You have to decide whether there's a natural grouping here, an island of tree or a wildlife corridor. You have to decide whether they complement stormwater management designs. And we may later hear something from Matt Waters, who is the city stormwater expert, as to whether they have any effect on stormwater management. Do they exist or conflict with sediment and erosion control? Is that really relevant in this case? One consideration is whether they do or do not conflict with existing utilities. We've heard testimony. Do they do or do not have proposed structures within their drip lines? And we have heard testimony to that and what effect that might have on the trees that exist and proposed structures and so forth that are before us. Are they particularly specimens? Are these specimen trees? And that's a question that might be asked of an arborist. Are they really specimens? And what does that mean in technical terms? Because it has a meaning. It's not just any old tree, but they're specimen trees. Are they within proposed buffer areas? They are not. Are they recommended for preservation? They are not. And are they recommended for preservation by the Department of Planning and Zoning? And well, we've heard something along those lines. Could you scroll down, Mr. Sale? So these are all just factors to be considering. Yay, nay, 50%, 60% yay, 40% no, whatever. But consider these factors as you make your ultimate decision. Now, the last section is an interesting one that Mr. Beard mentioned, conflicting criteria. In the event that two or more conflicting guidelines are present, well, there may be a yay on one or two, and there may be a no on one or two, or you may feel that some are more important than others. Well, then you must give consideration, not necessarily a determining factor, but consideration shall be given to those criteria most relevant to the planned use. Well, the planned use is as we all know, is a two-story mixed-use commercial residential structure. I'm not really sure what this means, but I thought that Mr. Beard made the best stab at explaining what it means to us. It's certainly not going to be, a body shop or I don't know. So it's not going to be an industrial type of use. It's going to be a more residential and commercial use in an urban village. Okay, can I have the next one, which is 2162-040 planting.
Hold on a second. 21-0, boom, boom. There it is.
This is an interesting one. Plantings should be provided within the site to integrate the building into the overall site design, to soften the mass of the building, separate the building from the parking areas and so forth. Now, what's important, I think, is B, existing tree stands, and natural vegetation should be integrated into the site planning plan to the maximum extent possible. Well, elsewhere in the code, the language which is used by and large is, doesn't say to the maximum extent possible. It just says as possible or to the minimum that's required. So this is, I think, a rather unusual place in the code which tells us to try to work as hard as we can to see that existing trees are integrated into the plans to the maximum extent possible. The work that's been going on in this case is reflective of that value and that standard. Interestingly, the areas of lawn shall be minimized. I don't think there's any there's lawn there now, and there won't be lawn in the future if the project is approved. Could I see the last one, which is the review criteria and finding 21-22-080?
Are you looking for that last document?
Yes.
Yeah, trying to get that. Hold on a second. There we go.
So these are the general review criteria that basically we need to decide. We're affirming or going contrary to the decision of the planning and zoning director and the staff recommendation. So the first off is anything needs to abide by the requirements of the zone in which it's located. The second thing is very important. The proposed design has to be in harmony with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. We've heard talk about what the character of the surrounding neighborhood is, and that I would suggest that you might consider things beyond just what the uses are or what the sizes of the buildings are, but what makes this neighborhood what it is. And people have described what they think is important about this neighborhood, and it can consist of many things. And this is a very general and abstract sort of a value, but it's the things that we read in the two previous sections which kind of feed into a decision that you make based upon that section B, design. The building and use has to be compatible with other uses and with the existing buildings and so forth on the adjacent lands. We've heard testimony to that effect. To minimize adverse impacts, are the proposed structures cited to minimize any adverse impact upon the surrounding areas by reason of blah, 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 and so forth, or other similar characteristics? Building location, height, bulk, shadows, location, intensity, times of use. So, our decision has to think about how it affects the surrounding neighborhoods and especially the adjacent areas. But our work is to minimize any adverse impact. The locations is something that's been talked about. And I'm getting the hint that we may hear more about building location so that all elements are adequate, safe, and efficient. The natural features, now there is a requirement that it minimally modify existing topographical features where practicable. And I think that this site actually has a grade 103 is higher by several feet than 101. I don't know that to what extent that is significant or is unconquerable or is something to be considered. But in any case, minimal modification of the topographic features is something to be considered. Slopes and soils, it's not a place that really has significant unique sensitive lands, not steep slopes, no highly erodible soils, and it's not finally in the critical areas. Now, what to make of all of this? We will not or should not be making votes based upon any one of these specific factors. Each of us has to decide whether all of the factors are satisfied. And we vote in general on yes or no. We feel that all of the factors are satisfied. If we feel that one or more of the factors, and specifically these, which sort of absorb the prior two sections, if we feel that they're not satisfied, we have to vote accordingly. But we will not be voting on A and B and C and D. I can only say that some years ago, the Board of Appeals on a contentious issue did that, and they voted yay or nay on various factors, and there were, 2 to 1 and 1 to 2, and it went different ways on different things, but the general intent was clear that the board did not want the application that was before them. Well, it went up on appeal, and the judge said, well, there's no unanimity. And so therefore he by fiat approved the design. So since that time, we are to vote simply yay or nay, and whether we make our vote based on whether we feel all of the factors are satisfied. So I hope that I haven't been, lecturing or hectoring you. I sent the documents. I think that in the end, when we sit and decide, just review them for yourselves, and we'll proceed accordingly. And as anybody would ask at the end, any questions? Do we have any questions based on this? Well, hearing none, I assume that I either put you to sleep or that I was exceedingly clear.
Well, I'll just make a comment that, yes, you were lecturing us, but I appreciate it. I think it's always good to go through these with, with an eye specifically to something that's in front of us. So I think this has been helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob, I agree. Thank you so much. It was really helpful to run through these sections. Even though I've looked at them all before, it's just going through them slowly, and with your highlights, it was really useful. Thanks.
Okay.
And I think especially germane is the comment about we're basically looking and voting holistically on all of this stuff as a package and not on any one particular item.
Yes, I think that's very important to ensure, whatever decision we make, that it survives upon appeal, at least with that respect to that, to our voting process.
Right, because often these things are never, they're almost never cut and dried. Everything's a set of trade-offs.
Okay.
I can only add that consistent with what Bob had reviewed on this last section, review criteria and findings, I sat and chaired the Board of Appeals, and when I did, and we made a decision that was inconsistent with the applicant, or we turned it down, we tended to apply the criteria, not just one, but we applied several criteria if we felt that aspects were inconsistent with the harmony of the character of the surrounding neighborhood, and also the adverse impact. And there were in cases where we were upheld, where we rejected the entire project. So I think that's consistent with the many approvals that we also gave, because it was consistent with the character, and we found other criteria to be applicable, that you take it as the package as a whole, and you reason through that. And I think that's what a court is looking for. And I think, Bob, you've put a lot of experience to work when you gave your presentation, and I think it helps the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Okay, there's a good dose of leadership there from an experienced member of over 28 years, 27 years.
No.
20 something. Come on. You don't like that stat.
I would have come on when I was 26 years old. That's not right.
Our
Lovely.
50-year planning commission. But
Right.
I would just like to add, yeah, thank you, Bob, and thank you for reminding the commission that we've learned from this process. Hopefully, you already knew that you have the ability to give a lot of input into projects, and things aren't a done deal when they come to you. I hear people say that, and I always think, or that the planning commission is afraid to make comments or to go against the department. And I always wonder, what planning commission are they talking about? Because I think you guys are very assertive and do a great job. And ultimately it might be messy, but at the end of the day, we're all getting a better product. And that's really the goal of the process. So thank you.
Okay, any other commissioner comments with regards to the leadership displayed by Mr. Waldman before we move into the review of the annual report? Hearing none, let's move on to handling the item D1, review of the annual report 2020. Ms. Jackie Rouse.
So the annual report is just a summary of,
You're really close to your mic. Could you maybe back up a little bit?
sorry. So how's this?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
So the annual report is just a summary of all of the activities that you engaged in over the past year. It lists all the projects that you reviewed, as well as legislation, and it has a summary of attendance for every night except tonight. And I do have to add tonight's attendance before it gets turned in. And you all can also, it starts out with a summary of what your responsibilities are under the code requirements, but you can also add any edited comments that you wish to the annual report if you so choose to.
Who does it go to?
It gets sent to, it goes to Regina, and then it becomes part of they take all the annual reports from all the boards and commissions and put them together in a document that I believe gets forwarded to the city council.
Okay.
And Bob, it also goes to the State Department of Planning.
Okay.
So what you all just need to do is decide that you're going to endorse the annual report and authorize me to sign all of your names to it, if that's acceptable. And then I will finalize it and get it scanned and forwarded to the appropriate people.
I move that we approve.
I second that.
Sorry, I was trying to actually bring up the document for you just to show everybody there, and this computer's really slow, but you've already been supplied the document by Jackie quite some time ago. And I don't believe it's changed since then to now. Is that correct, Jackie? Other than this change of adding this meeting?
No, there are no other changes to it.
Okay, and I had no other changes for it. It's the same basic document that we feed up the chain every year, a summary of our actions and what applications went through and what didn't. So there was
It's actually pretty detailed in terms of,
but to me, it's just the same thing every year almost. It is detailed, but I've seen enough of them that it's again and again.
it does take a considerable amount of time to put together, Ben.
I'm not saying it doesn't. It's everything we've done for the year. So
Thank
so we have a motion and a second on the, is there any more discussion with respect to the item?
Well, should the motion also state that, I approve with tonight's meeting added? Should it be clarified?
Fine, I'll accept that amendment.
As so amended. There's a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, go ahead.
Oh,
Discussion.
I'm sorry. I was just going to thank Jackie Rouse for the work she's done on this because I have read it. It is very detailed and somebody's got to put it together. So thank you, Jackie.
So Bob, did you authorize her to sign for you guys?
Yes, that's included in the motion.
Okay, thank you.
The amended motion. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed or abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Jackie Rouse, and sign for us, and we'll get that up the chain as fast as possible with the addition of tonight. Okay, that should conclude our agenda for this evening. I will share that one more time. And we had talked about once this meeting is over, going into a work session. I'd like to give everybody a 5-minute break, do a bathroom break, and then we come back for the work session. If we do want to put a good 30 minutes or so plus on a work session with the applicant. So all commissioners still in favor of that?
Yes, I
Sounds
just
good.
want to make it clear that the public hearing is continued until January 21st. Public testimony remains open.
We did that, and
Okay.
we'll do it again. Thank
And
you
with
very
that,
much.
I will make the motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
All right, there's a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting with.
I'll second.
And we will take a 5-minute break once that happens, and then come back for a work session with the applicant, which will still be televised on YouTube. It will remain live. So all those in favor for closing the meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is now closed, but we will remain live on YouTube and take a 5-minute break till we come back for our work session with Mr. Hyatt and the gang. Thank you, everyone. See you in 5 minutes. 9:05. And Alderman Payon and Miss Tammy Hook, please ensure you're muted during this 5-minute break. Also, Julian.
Thanks,
Ensure
Ben. I'm
you're
gonna be
muted.
leaving soon.
Okay, well, Tammy, you good? You need anything from me at the moment, or are you gonna take a break?
I do need some clarification on that motion I sent to you in the chat, but that's, that can wait. No biggie.
I can start doing that right now.
Yeah, no hurry.
I'll start doing that.
Yeah, because the minutes won't be due until January, but I just need some clarification.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
And Tammy Hook, I just sent you a clarification of the ex-parte vote. Hopefully that works.
Thank you. You sent it to my email?
Yeah, so it'll probably take a minute or two to go through this process of electrons transferring through the planet Zion.
I got it. Thank you.
Oh, wow, that was quick.
Speed of light, man.
Sometimes it doesn't seem as much.
Rider hops, not so much, but through the cable.
There you go. All right, we're now in the typical 9:09. So 9-minute break. We've got Dave back, Alex, myself, Tammy. Tammy, is there anything else you need at the moment?
Nope, I'm good. I'm getting ready to sign off. Everybody have a nice Christmas.
And there's two Tammys
Thank you,
down
Tammy.
there.
You too.
Thank you, Tammy.
You too.
Tammy,
Merry
me
Christmas.
too. Two reps.
Good
All right,
night.
Tammy. Thank you for everything.
Mhm.
Oh, Leo Wilson's here. Oh my God. Oh my God. Just joking. Come on, we're trying to have some fun. It's now a work session at 9 o'clock, 9:10. All right, before we start the work session, we have some council members here and some other people. Anything popped up that you need to talk about, Mr. Ross, Arnett, or anything? Just having fun watching us?
Nothing better to do with my life.
You're more pathetic than I thought, Ross. You left yourself wide open on that one.
That was good. Glad to see some levity. Oh. All right, well, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and get this ball rolling. That's the best way to get people to start showing up and getting out of the bathroom. Welcome, everyone. We are still broadcast live on YouTube for this work session, so the public can see what we're doing. We are now going to go into a work session of an undetermined time, not to exceed 10 p.m., but hopefully, 9:45 would be even better. But let's see where we get and how motivated we all are. Work session has begun. We have many reps, including some people who are maybe considered members of the public watching, but that's fine. Mr. Hyatt, would you like to go ahead and start off how you'd like this to go?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to punt to Leo Wilson to take you through the updated design.
Great. Thanks,
Okay,
Stephen.
well, before we do that, can we have a rough agenda? We'll have the updated design and then what?
Well, Leo's just going to go through a 30,000-foot view that we took into consideration, public comment, planning commission comment, and we've tried to revise the plan in a way we think preserves at least one of the trees and still is economically and commercially viable. But, I think that Tom Smith may have a couple of comments to make as well, because we've been working closely with them over the last couple of days to try and, as Mr. Waldman pointed out, preserve what's there to the maximum extent possible while still having a viable project. And I really think we've done a hell of a job, as you'll see. But I think Leo and Tom Smith and Kevin Campion can do a much better job explaining all those details to you, but we'll try and keep it brief.
Okay, well, hey, that's fine. And so
And
that's
it's still a work in progress.
gotcha. So that's the reasoning in our work session right now for the changes taken into public comment. And so we'll talk about that now. Anything staff want to add? Right when I ask you, Tom, you're taking a sip. Sorry, man. So that works for you? Or staff want to chime in before, during the process, or at the end?
This works for us, Mr. Chairman.
right.
We're happy to participate as we go along here.
All right, well, if anybody with a better recommendation, let's get it rolling. Thanks.
Well, thank you. So, we go through a meeting like we went through at our last presentation, and we had been working on this project with planning and zoning staff for months, and we really didn't hear anything about the trees from the community or anyone else, but things change. Things change, and you take the information you get and you make adjustments as you can, and try and set aside your preconceptions about where you should land and take into account what you hear and try and make adjustments, which is what we've done. So if I can share my screen, that would be good, which I think I can do. So I'm going to share my desktop here and see how we do. And I'm going to slide things in and out of here.
Oh, that's a wonderful West Annapolis. I like it.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's well, we have a tree problem there, but we don't have a traffic problem, which is exciting. So if you remember, this was the diagram we shared with you at our last meeting of how the site would be developed. And, I think there were things that people were, really the discussion came down to the trees, right? So without wasting a lot of time about the other components of this, that was our challenge, right? People said, you're not doing what you might be able to do to save those trees. And if you're going to take them down, you're going to have to convince us pretty strongly that that's the right answer. And so, can we move the building? Can we do this? Can we do that? And we took a look at it. And, as I described during our last meeting, we have these issues that are hard to get around, right? I have to provide parking that works. I have to provide, buffer yards. I've got to provide, a viable structure here so that, the development makes sense, and we have to abide by the whole village concept we have for West Annapolis, in addition to following some guidelines that we found out about the trees. So after I got some sleep that night, I went back over to the site myself and I took some pictures. Can you guys see my pictures?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We see your picture and it's moving.
Good, I'll stop moving it.
No, you go right ahead, man.
So I said, well, let's take another look at these trees and see what we've really got. And so this is the one in the middle, right? One, between the two structures right now.
That's the pin oak, I believe, right?
That's the pin oak. And, we've already heard testimony about, whether or not this is a viable tree to save from different people, is it in bad health? Anyway, that's the tree, right? Then I went down the sidewalk and I started to look at the streetscape, and, I was a little disappointed because I'm thinking, my goodness, there's a lot of talk about streetscape, and the streetscape today is less than optimal, I would say. I mean, it's really not compelling. And so the idea that it was, this great thing, I was like, well, this is what I'm seeing there. And, but anyway, this is the starting point, right? You go back and you evaluate these things, and here's the chestnut oak in the front. And as Commissioner Waldman pointed out, there is a substantial grade change across the site. This tree is on a boundary between us and the adjacent property owner. And, while it has, an odd root structure, it's a big tree and it's close to the sidewalk. And just looking down the sidewalk further and trying to get a sense of what we really have there. Of course, you see the tree on the other side of the street that comes way over, almost to the parked truck there.
And to clarify, the chestnut oak, that border, the property line is right there at the asphalt in the trunk, correct?
That's right. This guy here. It's right there. There's the property
right
line.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, right.
Do you know if the property pin is actually going, the property line is right through the middle of the tree? Or, because usually people plant trees on property lines.
It's hard to say. I mean, it looks like the asphalt kind of started over here at one point, and then, the tree grew over. So
my point is it definitely would be helpful to know exactly where that property line is going through that tree.
Yeah, we can get that. We can get that. I'm confident it goes through the tree. I'm just not sure exactly where. So again, going back to the streetscape.
So I'm sorry, why would that matter? I'm just curious why Ben's focused on where the property line is. I mean,
my focus is you don't wholly own the tree and the condition of what can be done with all the branches and limbs that are around it. When you're an adjacent property owner of a tree, there's an invisible line that goes into infinity. You can chop those branches down if you feel so and have a safety issue. So that tree could look very horrible with somebody that owns the property next to it wants to start hacking at it. It's not a 100% guarantee is what I'm saying. That's my point.
That may be true. The legality of all of that, that goes above my pay grade. So, but we understand that it's on the line, so that neighbor has rights to portions of that tree at the least. That I think we're pretty clear about. So again, just looking at the property, trying to get a sense of what's here, just looking at what goes into the street, what helps create the streetscape. And here you see the two of them together and some of the signage. And then again, a shot from the front and see what we're really looking at. You know, this is what we have today. This is what we've got here. And so this is down Giddings, and you can see really the sidewalk stops part of the way down the property. And there's really no improvements to speak of in the buffer area between the curb and the building, other than the one tree there that I'm not sure what type that is. And then I just went back around the rest of the building and took a look around. I'm like, well, my goodness, you know, this backyard is, you know, again, there's nothing back here. You know, that's from the one property looking down to the one on the corner. This is looking at it from Giddings Avenue. And, you know, I'm just thinking about what I've got planned for this thing and what I'm seeing today. And I'm thinking, gee whiz, you know, I think I got a pretty substantial improvement in place for you here. But anyway, I just wanted to reassess what I had. And so I did. So I said, okay. And then we go back to what we had initially. And then, you know, I want to look at what we think we were able to accomplish here with a couple of adjustments. And these adjustments are, you know, we don't come to these on our own. I worked with, you know, Kevin Campion's real driver on kind of helping us figure out what we can and can't do. And Tyler Valderson is our, you know, he's our tree expert. He can tell us what may or may not fly, what might have a better chance of working, that kind of thing, what the percentages are if we start to move things around. And so we took a look at this thing, and after, you know, a long, hard look, we said, well, maybe we can move this building back and maybe we can reconfigure the parking lot. And so Tom Smith and Kevin Scott joined us on the phone for a work session. And then Tom stopped by and took a look at it with us as well. And you know, we just kind of, we took kind of a team approach to seeing what we might be able to do. And we said, well, we simplify the parking lot and, you know, modify the buffer yards a bit from what we initially had in place to what we have today. I've given myself the ability to move this building back by about 11 feet. So what does that do? Well, 11 feet is a pretty big deal for that, for the oak at the property line. And in fact, this puts the face of the building in line with the face of the building at 101, 103. This line right here. So the porch is open as we saw on the photographs, but the face of the wall is right here. And I'll let Tom or Kevin talk about these in just a minute. But we said, well, if I move this back and then I adjust this walkway assembly I have for my outdoor dining area around the building, then perhaps I can make an adjustment to further help our chances to preserve this tree by kind of jogging that deck back so I can leave a more kind of unaffected area in this corner around the chestnut oak. And so we said, well, what does that do to the rest of my tree count? And how do I get the rest of my landscape to work? And so Terry Schumann from Bay Engineering said, well, Leo, if you do that, I'm going to lose some of my stormwater areas. And I said, yes, but we think we might be able to do some here and actually move some up front so people could see how these rain gardens work and bioretention, that kind of thing. So we've kind of reduced what we're doing in the back in terms of, you know, a lot of extra planning a bit. We've slid the building back. We provided an island in the landscape area, and we adjusted the front. Now, the thing I'm excited about here is, well, okay, we can save this tree potentially, but if it were to go at some point in the future, we think by setting up these other trees, we have the ability, if this goes, to set up a third tree and finish this streetscape out in a way that's consistent with what we think it ought to look like. And of course, now we still get all the sidewalk improvements and everything else. So our discussion wasn't so much about the building, it was about the siting and what we can do. And we've seen some, diagrams that said, well, what if you put the building in the back and put the parking up front? Then that's less of an impact on the tree. And the answer I would say is that, well, once I park over those roots, it's almost the same as putting the building there. And it runs counter to the whole set of guidelines we have for West Annapolis. So I didn't like that idea, but shifting it back 11 feet, I don't think it's as strong in terms of developing the street face for the building. But, again, Commissioner Waldman went through the guidelines for, how you will evaluate this. And it starts to say, well, if there's a way to do this, you ought to do it. So to the extent you can, you should. And so that's what we're trying to do. Now, I'm going to let Kevin talk for a few minutes about the next 2 slides, if that's okay. Is that okay with you, Kevin?
Yeah, that's great.
You want to see anything more about this?
I'll come back to this, but I'd like to talk to the next slide.
Okay.
So we really wanted to establish, where are the roots, and with the formula that these big trees have significant root zones that extend out, roughly 1 foot per every inch of diameter. So that chestnut oak has, we would surmise, has, in theory, a 42-foot range of roots, and now we know that those roots are probably, that tree was probably planted before some of these improvements. So we're pretty confident that those roots are under the driveways, but we think that those roots are probably not under the foundations of 103 and 101. So, and if when those buildings were built, if they were built after the tree, they definitely would have impacted the roots at that point. But maybe they were.
What line delineates the root structure there in that picture?
The orange. The orange hatch is the critical root zone, and basically the red line is a radius of the critical root zone. The black dash is how I sort of measured the canopy. Because they've been amended by BG&E, these canopies are hanging heavily to the west, not to the east, as you saw in all of Leo's pictures. So I just wanted to, we've seen some other circles drawn to identify the trees, but we thought it might be responsible to try to use data and methodology to show you where the roots may be. So we think that the chestnut oak, obviously those roots are probably under some of the driveway, maybe under the sidewalk, but they're also and then the pin oak, is between the buildings, and also, quite a bit of influence to the south with the roots. Now we also thought that these trees would commingle their roots, so they're sort of competing with each other, so the pin oak is probably taking up more space within our project, therefore making it a much lower contender for tree preservation. And the chestnut oak is sitting on, it has some roots running to the north. So, because it's on the corner of the property, because it's not so impacted by construction as the pin oak would be, we think it would be a better candidate. I have to add, neither of these trees have had any care. Like, they've been paved over, they have had walls built around them. Nobody's given a lick of concern for these trees until now, which we understand, but they've certainly been abused by all accounts. BG&E, paving, walls.
I think the ivy on the pin oak is indicative of the fact that nobody's had any interest in looking out for that tree. I have one quick question for you. I went to look up what the age of the 2 buildings were, and unfortunately the state property tax database does not have the age in those property records. But I was estimating the 103 to be, that structure's got to be 90 years old, maybe built in 1930, give or take, from the architecture. And then, the Morgan Gerard building, 40 years old or something, maybe 50. And so I would imagine that 103 was there, when that, I don't know how old that chestnut oak is, but probably the building preceded the tree, or it was a very small tree at one point, and vice versa for the pin oak. That probably when the Morgan Gerard building got put in, that pin oak was probably fairly large, And my guess is there was some, harped on, the building of Morgan Gerard probably was not good to the tree. And which probably not the case with the chestnut oak.
Yeah,
I mean,
potentially.
is that the right way to look at it?
Yeah, I don't know how those buildings were. The Morgan Gerard building might have been built on an existing foundation, so that who knows what was there before Morgan Gerard.
Right.
So I don't know. But in general, we just thought we've listened to everyone, and everybody here's nobody wants to take down a large old tree. But if we're trying to stay true to the comprehensive plan and create an urban village, and we're trying to create a compromise, we thought, okay, and the chestnut oak would be the better candidate to try to save. So that's I just wanted to explain how we got to the plan that Leo was just talking about. So that's that plan. And then Leo, if you go back to the first plan, I think our goal here would be to, I sketched in where the dominant roots are. It's not just you don't just draw a circle for the tree trunk. You can track where the roots are going. And somebody like Jim Urban would certainly help. He would endorse that idea that we can track these roots. We can do exploration. We can figure out where they are. We can then create a plan for this tree. And to the best of our ability at this point, we think that moving the building back to the line of 103 Annapolis is a good start, and then doing all of the infrastructure in the front as wood deck, so that we can, once we identify the root paths, we can place the footings for the wood deck around the prominent tree roots, and then we can take better care of the tree, and then do as little intervention within the critical root zone in terms of planting as possible. And then like Leo explained, that if the tree doesn't make it, which our arborists have advised us that it has a good chance of not making it, we do have the ability to add another tree. And I do think we have to ask those questions too. We've been asking a lot of questions about how do we save this tree, but if we're trying to develop an urban village, I think the commission should be asking every applicant to plant more trees, plant bigger trees, plant healthy trees, and make sure the applicants create large soil volumes for these trees so that they can grow for the next 100 years without having to, sit next to a paved road and fight for their life. So I think, planting new trees, planting more trees on every, not just on this project, but on every project in West Annapolis over the next 20 years, will create a successful result. So I think that, we're talking about saving a tree, but we have to ask the other questions, and some of these questions are just as important, like which other trees are we planting? How big are they? How diverse are they? So I think we're achieving that here. In the parking lot, we're adding silvicelles on the top of the parking lot. We want to add some trees there to shade the parking lot. There's not a lot of planting space, so we talked with planning and zoning about adding a band of silvicelles under the first spots to create more soil volume. And all the other trees that we're suggesting have a lot of soil volume afforded to them in this plan.
And the trees in the back with the silvicelles, are they as indicated in the prior design? I think there were some species of oak. Is that the same, or?
Yeah, the Giddings, if you look at the south side of Giddings, you would see a row of willow oaks. So we thought that the trees along Giddings would be willow oaks, so we can create an alley on both sides of the street. The trees along Annapolis Street, we've changed to American yellowwood, which is a larger tree, but not as big a tree as an oak. We're still concerned with the power lines, which you can see in red right along the sidewalk. We're going to have to deal with those power lines again with anything we plant until the time when the city comes and buries them, which maybe before these trees are 30 years old, who knows? But we thought American yellowwood was a native tree, has more habitat value than the cherries. The willow oaks complement the trees on the south side of Giddings. And then in the parking lot, we're suggesting willow oaks on the south, and then Shumard oak on the north, which is another native oak.
And that's in the thing that was sent around today. the planting stuff's the same, except the site layout's a little different.
Correct.
But we can use that at least because I looked at that pretty detailed earlier today, and so I have a sense for what those plantings are. But that's basically the same as the stuff that was sent around.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe.
And that's this stuff here, right?
Could I ask a question to Mr. Campion?
Yeah, sure.
How does the foundation line of this proposed building compare to the foundation line of the existing 103?
Yeah, so Leo, let's go back to the first plan because it's there. It's great because Leo just asked us to put that on the plan. You can see a dash line. Both buildings are located on this plan as a dash line. So you can see 103 is there. And then the Morgan Gerard building is to the south. It's a dash line that kind of goes in through from the deck all the way back into the parking lot. You can see it, but the intention was to move the building back to the face of 103, where we think roots would have stopped.
Wow. Perhaps more importantly, that face now lines up with 105 and whatever's it sort of lines all of those building faces up on that kind of on that whole block is that's the sense that I'm getting there.
There are two things I'm taking away from this. One of them is that the proposed foundation is basically the same as the current foundation. So that I think that you're right. I think that the roots have probably grown up to the current foundation, and with the proper, care, air spading or whatever techniques you use, they've already hit that corner arc quadrant, and it's not going to intrude into new space, into new root space. I think that's a significant alteration. The other thing that strikes me is you talked about the decking, changing it from concrete to wood decking. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that mean, what does that mean in terms of the effect on the root systems? Does water drip through? Is it good? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what might be underneath the
Sure.
decking?
So Commissioner Waldman, you're just to follow up on your point. We also moved the building away from this property line by several feet and did just what you said, which we abided by the existing face of the building on both the side and the front. And so we thought even this little bit might be helpful to try and maintain, even though the wall isn't moving. But at least when we go ahead and demo the building and we take some care, we can make sure that whatever we do here wouldn't go further into the root zone than what we have currently.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I don't know who thought of that one, but whoever did deserves something. A drink in a bar that we can't go to.
And that's kind of the Alderman Savage suggestion, if I remember correctly.
So can you tell me what effect wood decking has rather than what had been originally proposed?
Sure. So, we do these decks in all different ways. And the most durable one is to do them out of some type of hard surface like stone or concrete. And, those for commercial uses are often, kind of more desirable. But in this case, because we've got a whole nother set of criteria that we need to pay attention to, we decided to go to a wood frame deck, which would be supported on like 6x6 posts that could be carefully excavated down in spots. Once we've identified where the roots are, go down in a way that kind of misses them. And we've done this before where trees that are intended to be preserved, you just have to, hand excavate down for the foundations for these porches. And frankly, if I had to, I could cantilever this. But then the wood surface itself, if it's gapped like you would see on a boardwalk or many of the other porches around town, will allow rainwater to penetrate that deck and go right through rather than run off. So this kind of provides more opportunity for rainwater to get down into those roots. And it honestly—
And Bob, sorry, I was going to add, I didn't mean to interrupt. Bob, it also is considered impervious surface because water will be dripping through those slats in the deck and hitting the ground and absorbing. And I think, Leo, don't you have a deck like that off of your office?
We do, Diane, Commissioner Butler. It's on our front porch. We did the same thing. And I think you misspoke. You said it's impervious, but that deck becomes then pervious because.
I meant, yes, sorry, I meant pervious. And I really do like the deck on your office. So I think it looks nice, and it also is the right thing to do to help make that tree, survive and thrive. So it's kind of a double win in my mind. So thanks for that.
That deck on your office is something I always wanted to say driving by. That wasn't part of an original plan with that building, was it? That was a green area, but now it's covered with deck, I'm guessing.
No,
So
it was part of our original presentation and approval for the deck.
was covering up a nice green area with boards and it is pervious, but it's not grass. It's not cooling, it's heating.
Well, as soon as I
always wanted to address that, and I finally have. I'm going to stop that. I'm done.
Well, at some point, as my staff has been asking me to do, I'm going to put a table and chairs out there. Right now, we just have benches, but we thought it would be a nice place for outdoor meetings and gatherings. And so our
do
intention,
yoga out there, yoga mats.
Oh, come on.
yoga for those who do yoga.
What are those little square units that the green? Yes, what are those?
So these are planted areas directly adjacent to the deck. And how we've done these in the past, in talking with Kevin, and these can be done out of metal plate. So they sit on the grade just outside the deck, and the rainwater can still go down through them, although there's planting area. We just like to have this raised so that we can get a buffer between kind of the street face and the building itself. And again, following the guidelines, you should use the landscape to create a buffer between the building and the sidewalk. So we thought this would be a nice spot to do those. And it also helps me to mitigate the grade changes, because as you know, it drops drastically from one end to the other. So this gives me an opportunity over here to get the ramp up here, which will be ADA compliant, ramp over here. And then, we're still figuring out how all these grades work. As I said, this has been a kind of a whirlwind over the last couple of weeks getting to this, but Tom and Kevin have been helping us with it. And I think we're close. I think we're close to something that works here. As Kevin was mentioning, and as you did, you have to identify what is a reasonable target for preservation. And, again, we started at a place where, there wasn't concern about either one. So when we determined early that the likelihood of survival was very low, but again, after hearing everything, we can make a case for the one. I cannot do anything about the other, because as soon as I cover this area here with building, the damage to the root system is just not survivable for that tree, we don't believe. So we could do gymnastics to try and make that happen, but I think to work to the greater good, let's focus the efforts on the one that we think we can save, and let's pursue that aggressively and finish the rest of the mitigation through the other means around the property as we can.
Could also just other details. There are 4 trees at sort of the corners of the parking lot, so to speak.
Yes.
And that's Mr. Campion said the ones at the top are what? Yeah, what are those?
Well, they're oak trees, but I can't recall what kind they are.
I
Kevin,
can't either.
Sorry, I'm muted. It's a Shumard oak, and it's just another. Rather than have all the same species, we use another variety of oak.
Okay, and then down at near the entrance to the parking lot, both of you, I think you said both of those are willow oaks, correct? And they reflect what's going on the other side of Giddings.
Correct.
What are the 2 that are closer to Annapolis Street? What's planned for there?
Also willow oak.
Okay.
All 4 trees.
And where do you plan to put silva cells or some form of non-compacted soil underneath?
So for instance, we're specifying it on the north side of the parking lot because there are 2 trees with a tighter space with not as much soil volume. So we wanted to give those trees a chance to thrive and grow for decades. And so we're putting silva cells under the first 2 parking spots, the first parking spot on either side of the driveway. On Annapolis and Giddings, due to the layout, we have plenty of soil in every situation where we're planting a tree to give each tree, more than enough soil to thrive.
And again, it's a
Right.
result of shifting the building back. You know, we're able to get the
Yeah.
starting point further away from the power lines.
Yeah.
There was additional space available for the root zones and for some other plantings. And so, yeah, that's that.
Okay, well, I'll be interested. Yeah, good. I'll be interested in the details. Well, to all of you guys who collaborated, I appreciate the presentation tonight, huh?
Ditto.
So
Yeah.
what we're trying to get a beat on at this point is, you know,
Yeah.
look, we've made these changes, and as I've said before, you know, this process isn't always linear, and this has taken us to a different place. I do believe that we're going to end up with something really quite nice here. I mean,
Yeah.
the first result is not, you know, to resist the change, and the second is, well, let's see what we can do with it. I think we have a really nice outcome here. And what we're trying to gauge is, you know, what is the likelihood of success with this based on what we're seeing? I'm not asking you to vote, but I'm trying to get some feedback that tells me, like, am I going in the right direction? Does this make some sense to you? And, you know, what do you guys think about this?
You know, that tree, the chestnut oak, and the canopy goes over a majority of the property. We go, in the previous design, we go from a certain number of trees and canopy to now this with a certain number of trees and canopy and a different type. Are you taking credit for the canopy that goes over the property line? Is that considered part of your credit in the equation?
I'm not sure that, you know, we have drilled down on it that far. I mean, it does provide indeed a good bunch of canopy there, but really the requirement is for how many trees you place as part of your mitigation. It doesn't really, you know, I mean, so it's, the other trees will certainly provide more canopy than is there today over time, certainly.
Okay, and I'm looking at this from, you know, near term and far term. You know, obviously, big beautiful tree there that's established. If it can stay there, it's great to be under and looks good, in my opinion. But if you have a chance to renew everything and create a design for 30, 40, 20, 30 years down the road, you said to me you're taking that into consideration in case when this tree does go at some point in its life, you're going to be able to replace it with another tree there that would then flow in hopefully nicely with the rest.
Right, and again, you know, as the properties are improved over time down the rest of the street, the hope would be that we would see these patterns start to develop in a linear fashion down the block and across the street. You know, I know that it would be ideal if the city had opportunities, because I didn't go down the block in the photographs I showed you, but as you get down towards the street, there are no street trees. So there's something about, you know, like, this is a great start, but, you know, maybe we can use this as an opportunity to set the table for other people to start to follow this pattern.
I would say that's lovely. Yeah, I was going to say that's a great idea, Leo and team, because I do think it's going to improve the street and the streetscape over time in a way that you know, would not have been done if you hadn't taken another look at that. So I think it's going to be an incredible improvement for the streetscape, and you know, I just appreciate the fact that you took the time to look at this so closely. I think it really looks good at first blush.
I'm impressed by keeping the foundation within the same boundaries. What's going on? I'm really impressed by
Diane, you
that.
should mute.
Okay.
Keeping it into the same, you know, keeping the foundation to the same place that the current foundation is, is very impressive to me. I mean, I already stated what I thought about it, and timber decking or whatever plastic decking is also could be a great plus. I can only take your word for it that there's sufficient soil volumes in the places where you're not having to do the silvicels. Perhaps you could in the future just explain to us more about why you think that. So anyway, you know, the parking lot's the same as the parking lot's a parking lot. You can't make it any better or worse. And we'll see what happens with the adjoining property in terms of buffering and so forth, because there's opportunities over there. And you've got big trees on the next property too. So we'll be going around about that. So at this point, my reaction is positive.
Yeah, same here. You know, as I mentioned in the past, the building form is really something I think we have to be really careful about, because in the layout is because that's why I mentioned the age of the other structures is, you know, I'm assuming this is going to be a very nicely well-built building that, you know, like the place next door, 103, that building's probably 90 years old. And, you know, if this one is similarly well-built, it's going to be there 90 years too. And which greatly outlives the life of you know, the life of either one of those trees. You know, assuming in best case, maybe got 30 years left on them. This building's going to way outlive that. And I would hate to see something happen like, and I don't mean to be critical of Mr. Urban. He's a longtime sailing friend, but the sketch that he did that moved the building to the other side of the lot is just sort of an anathema to urban form that we're trying to promote in the revitalization of Annapolis Street. And so I'm happy to see that this sort of lines up with the rest of the buildings, so it is congruous. Yet it does, you know, it does plan for that longer future, that if that tree does happen to not make it or makes it another 10 or 15 years, you know, you're not going to have done something that you're going to, you know, somebody who postdates us is going to look at and say, geez, I wonder what they were thinking, because now you've got this sort of whacked out placement on the building and no tree there. But so I think this is going to sort of work harmoniously that way. So I'm in agreement with Bob that I think this done a really nice job here.
What are those tree types again?
Shumard oak, Shumard oak, willow oak, and American yellowwood.
Yeah, and if you look at that, one of the documents that was sent around earlier today, it has pictures of those, which I found very helpful. And then I actually went and searched and tried to find some pictures of those trees in context as street trees, you know, just trying to get some sense of, you know, what's that going to look like in a real world example. So thanks for putting that around.
Yeah, Mr. Campion, perhaps when you come back, you might have some pictures. Maybe I missed them, but of how do you spell, what kind of oak are they? What are they called?
We got it. We got you.
Oh, how do you pronounce that?
Yeah, this document.
Yeah.
Bob, Kevin Scott sent this around today.
Yeah, we prepared this to show you the native plants that we're proposing.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
So there's the willow oak right there.
Yeah.
And there's the yellowwood. And you can see, you know, it kind of spreads out a bit and doesn't get quite.
Yeah.
However, what age are those trees? Because I'm looking at when they start getting cut out on one side. But I mean, you can still grow them up and over the power lines and then
you can try.
I mean, it's one of the things you got to live with.
Yeah, we were moving fast, so we developed this, and then we modified the plan once again today. But you know, there's some other trees here, like the red oak, which is also probably a very viable species, a good option. But yeah, we're that's, you know, drilling down on the details. But we were thinking we're moving things around quickly today and yesterday and the day before to.
How far back would the trunks of those trees be from the power line center line?
So you can see out here again, you know, with the shift of the building back further, these are able to come back a little bit here.
How many feet, you know?
10 feet?
Probably about 10 feet, yeah, 12 feet.
10 feet from power line center line to center line of tree?
It's actually, I just measured it, it's 12 and a half feet from the center line of the tree to the overhead electric.
That ain't a lot.
But they also don't grow nearly as high. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, I think any tree, even a cherry tree, any tree is going to eventually have a relationship with those power lines.
Okay. But it's significantly lower at maturity than the other oaks. The yellowwoods are significantly lower.
I think the key criteria to the change was that it's native and it's not as big as the other oaks.
Yes, great.
Yeah, the shark bite's going to be smaller
There's a
eventually.
point of pruning, like on my street in Homewood, there's a point of pruning to where there's maybe a decade to where you're pruning it to where the tree grows above the power line elevation, then it can balloon out again. So it can be done, but 12 feet to me seems really close, but it is what it is. I mean, it's.
Okay.
We also consulted with Bartlett, Tyler Balderson on tree selection.
Yeah, and if you look at the existing tree that you're keeping, it's about 13 or 14 feet from power line, center line, and look what it looks like.
Right.
So there's your future. If you prune it right, you can do the same thing.
Maybe we can do a little better.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to throw water on your parade there, Ben, but you know, the problem is working with BGE, and I know this actually from Tyler, because they've come and done some work on the oak trees next to my house. You probably doesn't remember me, but anyway, the problem is I actually had them come because I wanted them to surgically cut these trees in a way that it could get above the power lines to do that. But you know, basically his response was, I can't do it. It's too close. BGE won't. I'm limited legally to do that. So we try to call BGE and say, you know, I'm willing to pay this guy to do the right thing. Will you just let him do it? And they said no. And this is like, and this may be a rant for a different day, but even if you're willing to spend the money and hire somebody knowledgeable who's going to do the right thing, they won't let you.
Well, you know,
there's something just really wrong with that.
My experience was wholly different, Alex, because I had the same issue come up about a month ago with trimming in Eastport, and Diane might know a little bit about this too, but they knocked on my door and said, we're going to trim your trees out front. And I said, don't bother, because I got my guy coming, who is Tyler, to trim them. And they said, okay. And they let him go up there and trim them, and they went around and did a nice job, and they kind of blend into the wires, and you know, they're more loose trees, but they did allow us to do it. I was kind of astounded. And
I can tell you,
maybe I didn't ask the right question.
This is Brian Adams. There's actually a law, and it's a 10-foot minimum. They must do the work if the tree is 10 feet from the lines or less, and it's state law.
Yeah, Brian actually came and looked.
So that means they would have to hack 10 feet from the power line, center line into that tree, which the tree is sitting, you're telling me 10 feet from power line.
So they won't let a private contractor touch a tree within 10 feet of the power lines.
Only they will.
Correct. They'll give you what's called a contractor assist, and where they come in and just hack it to meet the distance.
The yellow woods though will be trimmed as they grow and not after they're grown. So that may end up with a healthier tree in the long run.
Yeah, Mr. Malden, you're absolutely correct. Yellowwoods, if you structurally prune things properly, you put the right tree in the right spot, you're going to be 100% fine, just like anything else. The trees that were previously there never had that maintenance. So that's what happens is BGE doesn't care about trees, they care about their power. So that's why they get pruned that way. But if you stay on top of it, just like lots of proactive clients who use Bartlett, you're going to be fine. And you can see with this site, there's going to be maintenance that's going to be required. And I know that the applicant is going to do the right thing and have them maintained properly.
All right.
I wish I had learned that lesson earlier.
Is there any variances you're going to need for parking spaces or anything in back with the change in design that you're going to need from us, or?
Well, that's a great question. And we worked with Tom and Kevin, and I'm going to let them talk a little bit about this too, but there's a requirement that parking lots of a certain size have to have interior green space. And normally it's every 7 spots you've got a green area, like the grass area I'm showing on this drawing that Kevin's drawn in here. But there's also latitude in the landscape manual, which is an older document the city uses that gives planning and zoning some latitude here. So again, these are the details we have to work out. We believe that this carries, the intent of the code. The hardship here is once you have to do this stuff in the front, it gets harder to make the parking work. We can just make it work with this grass area. And so we have to work through that with planning and zoning staff and make sure that they're satisfied that what we've done here works. Because, you know, we're at the very limit, one less parking space, and I don't carry the day. So that's why it's.
Well, I'm happy planning and zoning has worked with you on that, because, you know, the idea of having green space in a parking lot seems to me to be wholly inappropriate for a very tight infill like this. I mean, I get it if you're building a Whole Foods parking lot or a very, very large parking lot, you want to break you want to break that up. But this is, I'm going to rant here for another 5 seconds quickly, that this is where we have this crazy suburban code that makes no sense in our context often, and that's to me a great example. Here, you want to minimize the size of the parking lot. Why would you force it to be bigger to be? Yeah, why don't you make that another parking spot?
Or could it be used as stormwater management, or, you know,
exactly.
Plant a cherry tree or just almost anything there.
Bike rack.
No, we got the bike rack out
That's got to be out front.
The gold-plated bike rack.
I mean, Alex.
I would just say we're already stretching the limits of our zoning code, which we all agree could use some updating. But you know, we have to work with what we have to a certain extent.
Hey, but can't we approve variances or changes? I mean, make a condition, you turn the grass, with something to think about, I guess.
Yeah. I
mean, in certain situations, you can get a variance to some things, but this isn't something you can get a variance to. But we have some discretion in the size of the islands. So that's, I think, where Tom is going with this.
Okay, but I think it might be a little more useful than a little grassy area. I mean, as long as you're excavating, I mean, even plopping an ornamental cherry there.
Yeah, something.
It's just something, right? It's a detail that, you know, you could take advantage of. Well, I personally, I've seen enough for myself tonight.
Well, thanks for the time. You know, we got more to do. Tom and Kevin, did you guys want to say anything?
Sure. Leo, thank you. So to the commission, we were sort of working on two parallel lines. The staff was looking at this, and the applicants and all the consultants were looking at this. And when we spoke on the phone, we were really looking at the exact same thing. So we really decided just to join forces and work collectively, which is why we had a virtual, and then we had a face-to-face sit down in Leo's office and work through a lot of this collectively. And I really do appreciate the fact that they gave the staff a seat at their design table to help to solve the problems for the benefit of the project.
Wow.
Okay.
Collaboration is based on trust.
So many hands make light
doing
work,
well.
and it worked out great. And, you know, we'll continue to do it. You know, it's not the first time and not the last. And, you know, we don't always get where we want to get the first time, but if you guys think this might be the right direction, then, you know, we'll try and put this together the rest of the way and come back with something that we can all feel good about.
All right.
I feel good about it. It sounds like everybody else feels good about it, and we could gladly have another work session on it if we need to, if the applicant feels need to or the commissioners feel the need to. But it's 10 o'clock right now, unless there's something pressing. It looks like everybody's fallen off.
I didn't hear from David. I was wondering if he had anything to say.
No, Leo, I think you've handled it well. I mean, I think, you know, look, I think everything's been said. I mean, I think the balance of a commercially viable project with, you know, the needs of, you know, what we can do here. I mean, I don't want to sort of, you know, I do think it's important to keep in mind, I mean, these power lines are such a big driver. These setbacks, you know, it does set a tone. And in some cases, you know, I mean, just being honest as somebody who lives in the neighborhood, I'm not really, you know, that's maybe the only disadvantage I see with the plan, honestly, which is even if you go to the building next door, Mr. Chairman, as you were describing, and sort of that this lines up to, if that building ever gets redeveloped, they're going to want to move it forward because it's not a commercially viable redevelopment project on the small footprint that it sits on. So, you know, we are setting some precedents here, but I think on the corner location and all, I think those things, you know, certainly could work over time. But I think if we look at, you know, sort of what urban village really is, I think that's, I'm not trying to talk anybody out of my project, but, I do think it's important that, we get West Annapolis right. So,
Yeah, I mean, I prefer in general things being close to the street if they're going to have any retail component, because as I've mentioned, if it's stuck way back, against past the lawn or something, people walking on the street are gonna have no idea what's going on in there, and they're gonna not pay attention to it.
yeah.
But again, looking holistically at this whole thing, I think if you guys feel it's viable from that retail standpoint, being back that far seems like a decent compromise.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our vantage point or my vantage point, it certainly, this work, if we could get this approved, this is a commercially viable project.
That's fair.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, Leo, but have you improved and made more hangout space from the sidewalk to the front of the building? Because that's what it seems like. It seems like there's more area that I would want to go there and hang out,
Yeah, you're exactly right. This area gets a little bit larger with this shift back on the property. And, this could be a real pleasant precinct over here. So, it's
post-football game, come back to West Annapolis and hang out at whatever's there that draws me there, because there's a lot more area and a lot more customers.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I would say is, all this stuff works together, which is with the amount of parking that's allocated to the restaurant, you only have limited amount of seating. So, we're right up against the edge of what a viable 3,700 square foot restaurant. So you can't just fill that outdoor area in a commercial sense because we actually can't park it.
Oh, there's plenty of parking.
Or other ways.
No, it's a regulatory issue. It's not a comfort issue for customers. There's actually code related to it.
Yeah, that's the driver.
So I'm just saying there's always a, there's always a constraint on the other side, but your point is
make it a good bar, and then people will just hang out on the deck.
Oh man,
that's what I want.
They don't drive
do, Alex. I'm with you.
I don't think bars are permitted in the zoning district.
You have to put the you have to, like they used to do in North Carolina. You have to put out the plastic food on the bar. And then when you drink a beer, and then they put the plastic food back under the bar when you leave.
Is that a condition of our approval?
Yeah, right.
No, in North Carolina, you just have to be a social club.
Right.
Awesome. Okay.
Mr. Williams, do you have any other designs on other properties on this side of Annapolis Street?
No, we do not. I mean, we've looked at the property next to it. I mean, the truth is, Alex's point around retail, the property next to it has actually struggled from a retail perspective because it's so far back from the street. Nobody wants to walk up to it.
Yep.
Are you required to have a setback that large on 105?
No, just as we're not required to have it here by code.
All right, but you're only required because of this tree. But I tend to agree with Alex Klein that I wouldn't be against if you owned it, whoever does it, I would not be against moving it much closer to the street and dealing with that driveway in a much better fashion. It would be healthier for this tree and give it another 10 or 15 years. So I think that the next property is a crucial when and if it gets redone. And I wouldn't be against moving it closer to the street. It is in fact more villagey.
Yeah.
But in any case, that's idle chatter.
Yeah. Yeah. The only point I was making is that today these buildings may line up, but in the future, it's unlikely especially if you change the zoning, like it's being discussed, into something that's more dense, you're immediately going to want to move all this stuff closer to the street.
Right.
They don't have to line up.
But everybody's on notice that if you move it closer to the street and there's a tree in the way, there's going to be a fair amount of, shall we say, resistance.
Yeah, and then it's the question that I know you guys are trying to balance, which is, if you look at it, if this building does last for another 90 years, did you make the right decision there? Because at some point that tree, I think everybody is under the understanding that tree will likely die. Yeah. But we're going to do all we can to try to save it. And what's that compromise worth over the next 90 years or whatever?
Well, good. We'll keep an eye on what you're going to do to save it. So and some of it may involve how you actually dig the foundation and what you need to do to help the root
Yeah.
structure, follow me?
I do. I mean, and I know I said this before, we did some pretty extensive design work to try to save a tree on our 706 Giddings site. And unfortunately that tree died. And, we didn't disturb anything even remotely as close to that tree as what's happening here.
Yeah, I know.
It's just hard.
Our fingers are crossed here.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you again, and enjoy the holidays if we don't talk to you before, and we'll come back with something we hope we can move on to the next step with.
If you require another work session, please advise through Sally and we can schedule something. Okay?
We'll do.
Any commissioners, last minute comments? Anyone?
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to unmute myself. I heard you, Leo. I just couldn't unmute and find that it wasn't working.
I was like, did you leave?
I think it's looking great. I'm really like the changes that were made. So I'm on board so far.
Good.
I look forward to seeing the final plans.
Okay, we'll chase it down.
All right.
Thank you all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you again. Work session's over. Please take us off of YouTube.